Right, it's so limiting.
My gosh, what a party. Yeah. Yeah. No, and chair ready. Good morning. It's actually after 10. We have a lot to discuss today. I'm Commissioner Javier Dare. I'm actually the chair of the Shore Board. Here today with you talking about something that I've been working on for at least the last 5 years. If you didn't get the packet of all the emails that we've been sending, communicating with the Forest Service, Congressman Ben's office, thank you, Administrator, for being here in the audience today. Our community has been incredibly devastated by China Hat, what's going on outside of Bend, the public danger, the fires, the drugs, the 911 calls. We've had an average of 724 calls the prior 3 years, and this year we're at already 449 calls today. Deschutes County, what are the impacts and what's going on? The really good news is we have someone, Jessica Gamble, who's out there working currently. I believe she is in the last 4 months transitioned 12 people from China Hat to some other better arrangement in the world, but it's still not good enough. She has accounted for, according to my recent conversation a minute ago with Chuck Hemingway, she has about 120 people on her list. And Chuck's analysis is maybe 60% of those 120 will actually move to a better location. So the meeting today is really going to require a lot of thought, because if you read San Francisco on page 36, it will say to you that the cause of homelessness in so many cases is substance use disorder and mental illness. That's page 36 on the top right, Michael Schellenbacher's book. So I'm just saying we have a lot of problems out there. It's really dangerous. The trash, the destruction. I don't know who took the tour this morning, but when I was out there recently, there were 7 really large pine trees, fir trees that were cut to the ground. 7 of them in one little area. It's unbelievable. The animals that have been killed, the dangers to our community, the gunshots that go on constantly, the fires. Thank you to Sandy Baxter for being here today. She had bullets whizzing by her head, not recently, and Sandy actually had served earlier as the Bend police chief. So this is not where Sandy wants to retire. We need to clean this up. It's unbelievable, and I thank you all. I don't know, do we need to go through and get everyone's name into the record, or is it already taken care of?
Yeah, I'll do that in a little bit here.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm happy you're here. I just feel like the encampments If you'll notice on the map, they've spread out, they're now going over to Sundance. Sundance is another extremely vulnerable neighborhood of our community. There's really only one way in and out. Sundance was burned, I believe, in the 1990s. And there's a whole string of 911 calls out to Sundance. So I'm telling you, it's going to be, it's going to require a lot of lift by this room. And I thank you all for being here today and realizing that, working on this from 2019, when Holly first took office, or took position, I met with her in July of 2019. And I said, Holly, we've got to do something. And you look at what's happened today and it's 100 times worse. So good job. Thank you for joining us. And let's begin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Perkins. I am the Vice Chair of the Coordinated Houseless Response Office and the Mayor Pro Tem for the City of Bend. And I'll be your facilitator today. I just wanted to give you a rundown of sort of how the next 2 hours are going to go. We're going to start with introductions around the room. Then I'll provide a little bit of background. Then we'll pass it along to a few different local folks in the room to provide us with different perspectives of the problems and the challenges and the barriers that we're facing today. We'll hear from the Deschutes National Forest, service providers, homeowners, and someone with lived experience of being unhoused in Chinatown. Our federal partner from the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness will provide a nationwide perspective of homeless problems and challenges. And then we're going to dive into a solutions-based conversations and end with next steps. Yes, exactly. Solutions. We're here for solutions. So we only have about an hour and 45 minutes to get to this point. So I'm going to get us started. And as a warning, because of our time, I will be gently moving us along if we get stuck on one topic for too long. We can go around the room and introduce ourselves. Again, my name is Megan Perkins, and I am the Vice Chair of the Coordinated Houseless Response Office.
Hi, I'm Keith Harris with the Department of Veterans Affairs, serves as Senior Advisor to our Secretary on Veterans Homelessness, live in Bend.
Hi, I'm Linda Long. I'm formerly homeless in China. Andrea Blum, and I'm City Councilor for the City of Sisters and on the Pro Board.
Great. I'm Katie Miller. I work for the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness. I'm a senior regional advisor. I work in 12 states. I'm based in Seattle, and Oregon is one of my states.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks for inviting me. I'm Andy Correll. I'm a special agent in charge for the Forest Service in the Pacific Northwest region, which is Oregon and Washington.
And good morning, I'm Holly Cheeks, I'm the Forest Supervisor on the Deschutes National Forest.
Good morning. I'm Molly Heiss. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of Community Services with Neighbor Impact, serving for Deschutes and Jefferson County, and we're the regional community action agency. And I'm an ex officio member.
Good morning. My name is Daniel Richer. I'm the Mayor of Lapine and I'm a Crow Board member.
I'm J.W. Terry. I'm the Executive Director of Central Oregon and Community Outreach. I'm also the State and Bend Chapter President of Banded Brothers and Post Commander for the American Legion.
Good morning, everyone. Brian Giddy, Oregon Field Office Director for the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Good morning, Kat Swigger, President, City Council of Redmond, and Crow Board Member.
My name is Margie Hoffman. I'm the Oregon State Director for the United States Department of Agriculture's Office of Rural Development.
Angie Powers, Deschutes County, just running the room today. Hi, everyone. I'm Gina Rentina. I'm a Policy Director with the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness.
Good morning. My name is Becca Angelo. I'm a Senior Advisor at U.S. State Rural Development.
Hello, I'm Eliza Wilson, and I'm the Chair of a local continuum of care, the Homeless Leadership Coalition. I'm also the Director of a local nonprofit that works with youth experiencing homelessness and also have lived experience in homelessness in the region.
Tammy Bainey, Executive Director for Central Oregon Intergovernmental Council, our region's council of governments, and we are the lead helping the continuum and a lot of the governor's efforts too.
Good morning. I'm Jill Reese. I'm the Deputy State Director for USDA's Rural Development Agencies here in Oregon.
Good morning. My name is Colleen Thomas. I am the Supervisor for the Deschutes County Health Services Homeless Outreach Services team and our harm reduction program.
Good morning, I'm Kirsten Ray, representing the Department of Housing and Urban Development, Director Guinea. I'm also the Director of the Oregon Federal Executive Board.
And good morning, I'm Patty Adair, since I've been, you want to take it up?
Sure, Ben Schmuller, field rep for our formerly Chavez Dreamer.
And Sandy Baxter, Woodside Ranch resident.
Adam Jackson, Woodside Ranch resident.
Mark Gitzel, I'm the patrol captain for the Central Oregon Zone of the Forest Service, the Ocho, the Deschutes, and Fremont Wyoming.
Good morning, Caitlin Webb, public affairs for the Deschutes National Forest.
Sean Greenaway, board member, home board network.
Juliana Collins for
Control this district manager of the Oregon Department of Transportation.
Eric Kinsey, member Ben. Then Wyoming Community Advocate.
Kathy Skidmore, executive officer at Central Oregon Veteran Community Recreation.
I'm Eric Croft with Deschutes County, I work as deputy county administrator.
Anna Krenski, Bulletin.
Todd Riley, then party listings fire chief.
Michael Schultz, Deschutes County Sheriff's Office, I run the corrections.
William Bailey, I'm the patrol captain for the Deschutes County Sheriff's Office. Nick Strader, I'm chief of staff for Congressman Benz.
Gavin Coble, Senator Merkley's office, Central Oregon, field representative.
Nicole Van Eikeren, field representative, Senator White.
Mickey Durding, Strategic Initiatives Manager for the City of Bend, assisting the Coordinated Houseless Response Office.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for engaging with us to help us find some solutions and accelerate our local efforts here at home to move unsheltered people living in spaces that are not intended for habitation to shelters and camps that are safe and dignified, and a place to reside and an opportunity to connect to resources to move into more permanent and stable housing. One of the CHRO's strategic priorities was to address the crisis of unsheltered individuals experiencing houselessness. And knowing that our region has an unsheltered rate of houselessness that is double the national average. A multi-agency collaboration and coordination are critical, with Central Oregon's unique geographic location and closeness, and action by one jurisdiction impact the rest of Central Oregon. Often, local government is the first to respond to issues around homelessness, but we don't have the necessary tools in one toolbox to address all of the issues when people are experiencing homelessness. And each agency in this room has its own toolbox to address problems through their available means. And by bringing everyone together in the spirit of collaboration and collective responsibility, we can enhance our response by becoming more creative and effective in developing solutions we can provide together. And that is why we established the coordinated office, and that's why we've engaged with our federal and state partners today, as no one agency can address and solve homelessness alone. And it takes all of us working together, including our community members, both housed and unhoused. As you've heard, Chair Adair and many others have been advocating for solutions for years now. The City of Bend's mayor and I have been advocating for a federal partnership going all the way to DC. Holly Jukes, supervisor of Deschutes National Forest, has also been elevating a need for multi-agency collaboration and coordination at the federal level. All of our voices, including those of our community members, led us to where we are, to be here where we are today. And so we heard you were listening, and we're here to have this solution-based discussion. So first, I wanted to, if we could get on the same page about the problems and the challenges and barriers that are faced at China Hat. And so I think what we're going to hear from a few people to start. And I believe, Holly, you're up first from our Deschutes National Forest Supervisor.
All right, and I have some notes I'm going to refer to, so I stay in my 5 minutes or less.
Yes.
Well, thanks everybody for being here this morning. I wanted to start off with a couple of thank yous, particularly to the CHRO board for hosting this conversation. To the federal agency partners that I'm just meeting for the first time in this room earlier this morning. Thanks for traveling near and far to be here. I really want to acknowledge the many volunteers, our neighbors, and the public land stewards that help us keep the forest cleaned up in a lot of places, the challenges we have around encampments, as well as the other activities that happen, like household dumping of trash. And I really want to acknowledge another group of folks that some of which are in the room is the folks that respond, right? To our fire personnel, our EMS personnel, to the folks that provide services to folks. I really wanted to acknowledge all those folks that are on the ground every day and doing that work on behalf of all of us, and just know that you're appreciated. So I'll frame a little bit of the context of China Hat from my perspective, from the forest. We've certainly had challenges for many years, right, around unhoused people.
what's transpired at China Hat and other places on the forest is really reflective of what happened in our communities as the pandemic set in. It grew to something that has a scale, scope, and intensity that I think we're all feeling. And there's a lot of emotion behind that as well. And from my perspective, you know, the Deschutes National Forest is not 100% unique, but we're so close to community. We're on the urban growth boundary of several cities, subdivisions all throughout Central Oregon. And that's an amazing opportunity. And it's also a challenge as we deal with the things that are happening in urban areas and how they transition into the forest. In a lot of places, a forest is a half-hour drive away. Here, it's a footstep away. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how I view the role of the Forest Service, particularly the Deschutes National Forest here locally with this challenge. Obviously, we're an agency that's really ingrained in our mission around forest resiliency and the health of the forest and providing that to the public. Entrusting us to manage that with our partners and volunteers and all of you. As was pretty obvious, we don't have the expertise to solve a situation that we're seeing in China Hat or other places by ourselves. Because we don't have the expertise to do so. And so we need all of the brains in this room to help us with that. Folks have mentioned already this morning some of the issues that we are challenged with long-term encampments, with vegetation disappearing, invasive species coming in, the risk of fire, how that affects wildlife habitat. They're just a few things, right? And we all know that. And I say all that, and I also would share we're a forest that knows that collaboration can work. It can get us through tough problems. I think about how we respond to wildland fire. I think about fuels management across boundaries. I think about outdoor recreation management. And we don't do that in a bubble, we do that together. I would also share, you know, I live here, my employees live here, we're part of this community. We want to be part of community solutions. So I'd share that really quickly. And I think the challenges I've shared a little bit, but we also have an ongoing and upcoming fuels reduction work that's happening out in the China Hat area. It started and it will continue for many years going forward. And so it presents this challenge of heavy equipment, implementing prescribed fire on the ground, and how do we deal with the encampments that are out there that allow us to do that work and restore the forest. And I will need all of your help to do so and think through how we get that done. It's important to do so to protect our community from wildfire and restore the forest in the area. And I want to come with opportunities for success. And honestly, this meeting is one of them, right? When I think about all levels of government from local, county, state, federal, all in one room, that's an opportunity. There's a lot of brains, there's a lot of experience, there's a lot of different perspectives. So I see an opportunity with this conversation to make a difference for the forest and for our communities and show continued progress in Central Oregon. I'm almost done, and I'll end with an analogy that a few people in this room have probably heard from me a few too many times. But just over the last couple of years, trying to sort through my head, how do we deal with this incredible challenge we're all facing together? And when we talk about responding to wildfire in Central Oregon, we refer to it as a Central Oregon way. There's actually a city club conversation happening pretty shortly around this today. Wildfires also cross jurisdictions and land ownerships, and it doesn't matter. The Central Oregon way is described as we respond to wildland fire, not based on whose land it is, but where it is. We go from wildland to urban into the intermix together. So we bring the best resources to the table. It didn't always happen that way. When I hear stories from a couple of decades ago, everybody responded to their land with their color truck. We don't do that anymore. The leaders of that time recognized that we had to do something different to protect our community and best support our communities going forward and each other. So we understand the differences in our mission, we respect those differences, and we respond with expertise when wildfires happen. Homelessness and houselessness is inherently a more complex topic, but I hope we can find a Central Oregon way through it. All right, next we have Colleen Thomas.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to be here and to talk about some of the work that my team does with folks that are experiencing homelessness out on China Hat and across Deschutes County. So just for perspective, my team, we work with specifically with individuals that are literally homeless that have acute psychiatric disorders and or substance use disorders. The team consists of peer support specialists and case managers providing direct street outreach to folks that are experiencing homelessness in our region. So we roughly serve around a little over 200 unique individuals across Deschutes County that fall under that criteria. We average about 225 to 275 community contacts a week with those individuals. Our role is to be able to connect with folks, reducing those barriers to help connect folks to ongoing supportive services, shelter, access to basic needs, food, water, and heating sources if that is needed as well. With of course, long-term goal of getting folks connected to long-term stable housing, if that is what they so need. We've been providing outreach to China Hat for as long as I can remember. I've been doing this work for 10 years with Deschutes County, and we have continued to see the issue grow. I think that Ms. Perkins highlighted it too, that the pandemic, we've seen an increase of folks that have increased struggles and increased number of people experiencing homelessness. So we have changed our approach. Not all individuals that are experiencing homelessness have a substance use disorder and or mental illness. And not all people that are experiencing homelessness use drugs, or all people that use drugs are experiencing homelessness. I think that's just an important piece to highlight. One of the things that we've been able to do specific for China Hat, I call it a pilot program, but I'm realizing that it's now almost been a year. We are doing a mobile street psychiatry out to the folks experiencing homelessness in China Hat. That's 4 hours a month where we have rotating psychiatric providers connecting with folks that might need additional support. One of the biggest issues that we have is capacity. We do not have enough capacity to really support all individuals. In reducing those barriers to gain stability and make that choice to change their circumstances. Since we piloted the street psychiatry program just as specific to China Hat, we have served 24 unique individuals, over 40 individual visits. And we have 4 enrolled individuals in formal psychiatric services with Deschutes County Behavioral Health receiving medications. It might seem like a low number, but it's a huge success for us, for some folks that are really chronically struggling in the community. We have seen success in, again, stabilizing folks in the community, with them being able to reduce those barriers to connect folks to ongoing supportive services. We know if someone is struggling in the community, that to ask them to just access shelter or being stable housing, and they're not in a stable situation, then they're not going to be successful. We want folks to be as successful as possible. So being able to provide that service to specifically for folks in China has been really successful for us. And we've seen success in people stabilizing, accessing the services that we do have in the community, shelter, and then transitioning them into others, transitional housing, and then hopefully permanent supported housing. Our role again is to meet people, in the community where they're at to reduce those barriers, but our biggest struggle is capacity. A solution, ideal situation for us is if we could really grow that mobile psychiatry with an addition of a nurse practitioner, peer support, case management, to really come up with a multidisciplinary team to support folks to reduce those barriers. So that is our goal, and we continue to show up and educate individuals on fire safety. We provide safe using supplies, getting folks connected to treatment services as well. So the biggest thing for us is also when we are working with folks, we want options. We want to make sure that we can give people the dignity of choice and option to transition out of their current circumstances. And right now, even though we have seen success over providing different types of housing and services, it's still not enough. Even if we get someone completely stable and reduce those barriers, having choice of where they want to transition to is difficult.
Thank you, Colleen. I don't think Stacy's here. No, Stacy's not here. Not here, okay. So I think we're gonna hear from you, JW, or Kathy. JW, if you're okay, giving us a few minutes, that'd be great.
You're gonna pick on me?
I'm gonna pick on you.
I think I know most of the people in the room, and most of the people know that I'm not, I'm a raggedy old master chief, and This is my third career. I've been with Cobo for over 10 years now, as a president of the board, and also I've gone out to the camps. I'm an older man. I don't like to call myself an old man. So I don't ride out to the camps as much as I used to. I still do occasionally just to see what's going on out there. I want to make sure that we're not, there's too much them and us against going on in this country. And I want to make sure that our homeless community, we're not doing a them against us. Okay, I live out in the Deschutes River Woods. I'm concerned about fire in the Deschutes River Woods. And it's not from the homeless, it's from my neighbor that doesn't know how to take care of his fire that he's doing in the evening, or barbecuing, or the wife that gets overzealous at the on the stove. So when I continue to hear in the news and everything, the homeless and fires, the homeless and fire, they have it, but so do the rest of our community. And drugs are in the rest of our communities, including our schools, our bars, and everything else. And I deal with a lot of homeless. Most of them are not trafficking those drugs. Those drugs are coming from somewhere else. And am I not right? You guys work in it an awful lot. So, and now I'll get off of that stuff. We opened Veterans Village here a few years ago. The county commissioners helped us a lot. A lot of things changed since Cobo and the county and city and Heroes Foundation got that rolling. And we were able now to open more shelters and everything, but that's the catalyst that got it going. And I think right now, in the 2.5 years that we've been operating, we put 35 veterans, and Kathy, correct me if I'm probably off a number or so, but about 35 veterans into permanent housing. And you can't do that in 30 days. You can't do it in 90 days. You can't go out and say, you need to, we're going to throw you into this or that, and that's the end of it. I've got caseworkers, I've got peer support, I've got a lot of stuff, and we keep light touch with all the veterans that we deal with, whether we get them housed or not. And it's a heavy lift and a heavy project. And everybody seems to have ideas. And one, my gang gets tired of hearing from me. The Romans were dealing with this 3,000 years ago. Zoning laws and homeless people. And look how far we've come. So if we're really going to discuss this, we've got to do it on the ground level and really let's talk about it. And this crap about not picking up the phone and talking to your partners is goofy. This isn't my little world. You go back with me a long way, and so do you. I call it the rice bowl effect. This is my rice bowl, and I don't want anybody else in here. If we're going to do this and do this together, then we've got to be open with one another, and we've got to work together on it. And we've got to be not afraid to pick up the phone and go, hey, JW, what do you think about this? How often do you do that?
Me?
You.
Oh, all the time, don't we?
Okay.
We see each other twice as
So
week.
do I answer my phone?
Always,
Okay.
yeah. And do you answer mine when I call you?
Do I always agree with you?
No, not always,
All
but
right,
we're
thank you.
always working on the same
We
thing.
don't have to agree with one another, but we do have to work together. And we should do it on the level that we can smile and work together and not make it adversary whenever we're doing stuff. And with all of that, and I will say that we started again this year of going out and bringing trash out when we can with our trailer. We've done over 30 tons of trash, 30 tons. Am I talking right?
30,000.
30,000.
So far this year with what the gang's doing. And Cobo's not just working Deschutes County, we work Jefferson, Crook, and Warm Springs too, with our veterans. And although this was founded by veterans for veterans, anybody that walks through our doors or anybody's out in the camp when I first got here, and I tell this story to people that want to hear it anymore. I couldn't give something to a veteran that I couldn't reach over here with a mom with 2 kids and say, no, I can't do it because it's only for veterans. We can't do that at Cobalt, and that's why we changed our name to add Indiana Community. So that's it for me. I've said my piece. I'll go back to my office and think of 100 more things. But that's it for the day.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, guys.
Next, we're going to hear from Linda Long, and I'm going to say a special thank you to you for being here today.
Thank you, Megan. First, I'd like to thank the Master Chief for getting up on that stump and saying what you said.
Thank you.
Then I'd like to thank all of you for this discussion and for inviting me to share with you what I've learned the hard way about being homeless in China. And I do have notes because I'm passionate about this and I needed to stick to the plan. So, but you know, what we've all learned is that most of us don't notice, much less actually see the houseless until their cumulative impact on neighborhoods and community-wide systems is so great that only fear and angst ends up driving the conversation instead of compassion and understanding on both sides of the line. Recognizing this and intentionally focusing on solutions is a very powerful step. There are many paths to homelessness, as many paths to homelessness as there are people who are homeless. And not every path, thank you, Connie, is filled with drugs and alcohol, mental illness, or a general disregard for the common good. Obviously, these are powerful drivers. The homeless know this better than anyone. But we also know that putting all homeless in one of these 3 buckets leads to invisibility, discrimination, and a very destructive misunderstanding of the homeless community. My own path to homelessness was a very short street. With a degree in urban studies and 38 years of working experience, I moved from Minneapolis to Portland in early 2020, April. With a dream of starting a second career, advocating for the homeless, and maybe even building a tiny house village for people like me. 30 days later, the pandemic hit, and 30 days after that, George Floyd was killed in my own neighborhood, by the way, in Minneapolis. Portland was turned inside out, and I joined the homeless community in a real way instead of an academic one. It happened that fast. After literally escaping the Bend, I spent a year in Clackamas and Portland. After literally escaping the Bend, I spent 3 years waiting for affordable housing. I parked around in Bend. I found a safe refuge on Mount Bachelor. And when we had to leave for the season to let the elk roam, I was finally forced to move to China. The homeless is a community only in the sense that it's defined by houselessness and temporary proximity. It's a very diverse population with a surprising demographic. Without an individualized and supportive approach, purposely designed to address individual and unique needs, we will fall short, as we have been, of our goal, everyone's goal, including the homeless. They share that goal to mitigate, much less resolve homelessness. In my view, any effective combination of solutions will leverage the talents and skills within the homeless community and focus on creating a sense of ownership for the common good. Beyond the known personal barriers of overcoming homelessness, I'm here to talk about the lesser known, the lesser understood. I can tell you from personal experience how invisible you are when you are homeless. I was fascinated on how invisible I became. And I'm white. So, I mean, it's very difficult when you feel blamed for your situation and how painful the journey actually is. The barriers to healthy living and the path to getting housed seems endless. First, it's a full-time job just to keep yourself fed, clean, warm, cool, and safe and secure. If you don't have a working vehicle, the journey is nearly impossible since we don't have an effective public transportation system. Need to fix that too. And if you do have a ride, any job you find will most likely be one that's minimum wage, able to tolerate changes in your schedule, and doesn't require a daily shower and nice clothes. Even with a solid resume, I was forced by circumstance to move from the office to first food service, which I'm still in. Beyond personal barriers, there are systemic, cultural, and process barriers for agencies and nonprofits who work hard every day on a personal level to mitigate life in China. These are many, but I can speak to one here because I've seen it, I lived it, and I know it. And that's what I want to talk about is the difficulties that helping professionals encounter in creating effective outreach efforts, especially in remote, deep wooded areas in China. Approaching a camp as a stranger, even if you're homeless and you've been out there for years, even the camps in plain sight, it is against the unwritten but very powerful rule that you're not supposed to approach a camp at all. And it can be dangerous to break that rule. It means that isolation is a benefit for one side and a deal breaker for the other. We need a new way of connecting with the isolated, even including the ones in plain sight. Even with the strong efforts that have been made to reach out, we're falling short of engaging the homeless, creating a sense of ownership for individual situations and for encouraging a sense of responsibility for the land we're sitting on, which doesn't belong to an agency, it doesn't belong to a group, it belongs to all of us. God said so. So, first, I would like to emphasize that, I would really like to emphasize that playing whack-a-mole with the homeless doesn't work and it never will. Believe me, homeless people can be very creative. Necessity does that. Just necessity. Life wants to live. My homeless friends tell me that there are still well over 300 people in China. Multiply that by a factor of 2, maybe almost. It's 300 to 400 people is what they tell me. If it's swept, which is a word, by the way, is a word I find personally offensive, as it implies literally the removal of dirt. It helps nothing, take it out of our vocabulary, unless you're cleaning the kitchen. If we sweep people, they will move to Bend. Because they can't get off the planet. I've asked Scotty to beam me up and he just hasn't gotten done yet. So, some even have to walk down China and carry what they need back. Forced to leave, they will leave their possessions behind, which others will have to clean up. I know it doesn't sound like an effective solution to anyone. So also, I have to mention this, I hope I don't piss anybody off, but the reactive tools that some communities are using, like hostile architecture, are literally inhumane and serve no one. For the most part, I have not seen those methods employed in Bend. Thank you, Bend. However, undeniably necessary but aggressively planned road and space improvement projects, like the one that will happen soon on China Hat Road, are not entirely dissimilar, if we really want to be honest. They are happening well before a reasonable plan and rational options are available for those who will be displaced. The homeless who are forced out by improvement projects will just move someplace else, to the streets of Bend, or they will make new roads and move deeper into the woods. They're just trying to live through it. So in my view, displacement is our fault. We have to create more effective outreach approaches. And in order to do that, we have to engage individuals in China that are homeless. Why not leverage the skills and talents that are already there? Why not pay capable individuals to leverage existing relationships in China and create new ones to encourage and create participation in mitigating and resolving their own homelessness situation? I have a friend in China Hat who can literally fix anything. I used to call him the mountain magic mechanic man. He is a master mechanic. I've never met anybody like him. Why not man? To fix vehicles for the homeless. And this would allow him to get out of China Hat and others too. He's personally put thousands of dollars in my truck, Arlene, when I was homeless, and I paid him what I could. I Googled and I found 9 model examples across the country doing just that. Why can't we? Also, I have friends out there who are fed up with, who are just as fed up with trash cans and just as fearful of fires as the rest of us are. They're willing to help clean it up. But they're really busy just trying to chase down a few bucks for gas. So here's what I propose. And I came up with this not just by myself, with 2 other homeless people, because we got sick of seeing the news about the homeless. So we wanted to invent new news, right? So we got together and we wrote a draft business plan. We proposed a nonprofit created by and for the homeless, supported and sort of overseen or supported in some sort of umbrella way by an existing nonprofit that could work to build stronger relationships between agencies, nonprofits, and behavioral health professionals, to extend and enhance existing outreach efforts and do the actual work of housing people and cleaning up China. So go out in teams. Take 2 or 3 homeless and a behavioral health specialist and some non-uniformed police officer and you know, the variety of professionals that we need, take it out in teams and change the conversation. With my 2 friends, we came up with a name. We're calling it Epic Actions. And that's enhancing positive initiatives consciously. And it would be a way to work with public and nonprofit agencies to employ the homeless to help themselves and each other. Partnering with professionals and each other, we could fund community service teams filled with homeless people that could earn a little, clean up the sites, and talk to people. Just talk to people, change the conversation, start a conversation about what is the common good. Why don't you have a right to just sit out in the woods because it's available land? Why don't you start the conversation? So, and try to convince them, well, yeah, no, actually, you really don't have that right. So, I just want to make my final point. Thank you so much for listening. Most homes don't want a hand out. What they want is a hand up and a way out. And I think they would help us make a way. Thank you. My God, yeah, it's very personal, it's very painful for all of us to know this.
Thank you. Well, really brave of you. Thank you. Thank you. And then at last, we're gonna transition to Sandy and Baxter. You think they're podium standard all the way. There's Celsius Radio, who is a homeowner near China Hat.
Adam and I were giving minutes, so we'll get through this. I think we have to either not be from Central Oregon or living under a rock, not to know what's going on in China Hat. So Adam and I, if you look at that map that I like on my chair a little bit, oh, here it is. If you look at the calls for 2022, we're in this cluster right now. That's where we are. Oh, well, you all have, we have.
The top of this.
Well,
That first cluster.
yes, the first one. So I'm sorry if I get emotional as well. I'm going to speak with you of a resident living in that area, but also from the perspective of public lands recreational user. So I was actually born in Denton, and we still out in Sundance, and unfortunately I moved out to Woodside Ranch about 17 years ago. And in the last 5 or so, it was great out there initially. In the last 5 years ago, there's been a significant change out there. We have had numerous uncontrolled fires, and these are within yards of our property. We're not talking about miles out into Shoots River Woods. These are within there. You can see flames shooting 20 feet high. Anything that occurred, like any change in wind or slow response by the fire department, it would have been devastating. These fires burned forest land, trailers, tents, abandoned disabled cars, and trash.
even when these fires are allowed during non-fire season in the winter, people are out there bringing their trash, toxic materials that wrap up into the neighborhood that we are all breathing. We often hear the exploding propane tanks, which is another common cause of wildland fires. It's not uncommon for us anymore that we hear from each other as neighbors or from the sheriff's department. We've got a manhunt in the area and you look out our windows and you see a SWAT vehicle on drones overhead. There's another manhunt for an assault suspect or a drug investigation or drug trafficking, it's just a lot of different reasons. It's just kind of become a little, we can say, here they are again. And then of course there's the frequency of gunshots. Now, you might think that gunshots, you can shoot in the forest, but you can't shoot within 150 yards of a residence. And which they consider a campsite as a residence. So if that was really enforced, you shouldn't be hearing any gunshots from milepost 2 all the way probably out to milepost 10 and further. And I had an experience like that, Patty brought up. I'm in my backyard about a year ago, and I hear some gunshots. And I know that the sheriff's department, they kind of want to know where the gunshots are coming from. So stupid or not, I decided, okay, I'm gonna go and see if I can kind of figure out where they're coming from. I had no idea that they were shooting across the road. I thought they were just shooting in the air or whatever. And trust me, we hear gunshots all the time and we very rarely call on them anymore, unless they're super close. So, so I go out there trying to get direction, and the gunshot goes within feet of my head. And at that time, okay, I look for cover and I call dispatch. And I'm talking to the dispatcher about what's going on. While I'm talking to him, another one goes off, which the dispatcher hears. And so they sent the deputies out there. And yeah, and of course, the guy, I don't think the guy could have been a gal, even knew I was there. They were there for whatever, just shooting a gun across the road. So the sheriff's office gets there and they've always been great with when we call, they respond, but. So I'm talking to the deputy and he says, well, I'm waiting on the road for another unit. And ex-law enforcement, I totally get that before you go into an area like that, but it's just kind of funny because like we live that every day. So, and besides those issues of fires and gunshots, we've had many incidents of trespass, harassment, theft, threats, and even one incident where someone was walking, you got to pitch Woodside Ranch, a lot of the properties back up to China Hat. One incident where this woman had someone defecate on her back property. And again, if you haven't read the news or listened to the news about these other incidents occurring out there, the tourist, the little girl that was riding on her four-wheeler and someone shoots at her and her family, where the incident right behind Sunset Views where the golf course is, assaulting the 2 teenage boys. It's not acceptable anymore. And I haven't even spoken on the environmental impact of there, and I don't think I need to go into that, but what's happening is every time something gets closed down somewhere out, the China Hat has become the area where it's okay. It's all okay. They're not on Hill Road anymore. They're, and the county shuts down their road, just like the China Hat. It's all okay. You won't be bothered down there because there's no accountability unless it's something serious. There's no accountability for the trash, for the environmental hazards, for anything. They know that they will be, the illegal campers are going to be able to live there and they will very rarely be bothered. But that's what our experience is, and I think my time is probably up, and I'm speakers to say it. So thank you for listening, and thank you for trying to come up with some solutions and options for dealing with this situation.
Sandy? Linda,
Master Chief Terry, just want to thank you for your testimony and perspectives from some of the neighbors that, you know, field a lot of complaints and provide a lot of complaints about things that are happening. Every bucket has its bad apples, no question about that. It would not shock me if the data supported that there's a disproportionate amount of crime, fire danger, environmental damage that's happening in small areas. As Sandy mentioned, I think China had in this game of whack-a-mole comes the end of the road. It's, you know, where the whack-a-mole kind of stops. I think that has also led to people from out of the area, out of state, good China had for that very reason, where they can be unbothered. So, we've all heard a lot about the problems and what's happening out there. As a resident that lives in very, very close proximity to it, I'm just here to corroborate that those testimonies are real. This stuff is happening. I mentioned 450 phone calls to this area of 200 or 300 residents. What's that? 3 calls a day. There's 200 or 300 residents in Woodside Ranch, and I'm pretty sure we're not getting 2 or 3 911 calls a day to our neighborhood. I personally, in the last 3 years, had 2 people trespass on my property, both of which were intoxicated. One of which had 2 outstanding warrants in Multnomah County and was arrested on the spot. That was at about 3:30 in the morning. Not uncommon to hear, you know, similar stories from neighbors, theft from neighbors, bagging furniture or tools going in the sink. People walking down the road, like Sandy mentioned, we had a neighbor who had, you know, invested in a big 6-foot privacy fence. Because people that were intoxicated walked down China were harassing their kids, 6, 7-year-old kids being harassed across, you know, what was, country style fence. And, you know, to protect their property and their children, so they could just be in their backyard, without being harassed, they built a fence. I have a 1-year-old at our house, and I certainly have concerns about him being on my property, you know, unattended as he's growing up, given what we're in such close proximity to. So the crime is real, right? We've heard the stories of the, you know, gunfights amongst the campers out there. There was the tourists that were part of the quad business that we got held at some point for getting too close to one of these camps. Another quad company has moved their operations from China Hat area up into the Sisters area for, you know, safety concerns around their customers. Fire data is real. Captain Bailey has told me about an initiative last summer where he was having his deputies carry around fire extinguishers and extra water in their trucks to help get a head start on, you know, fires that they come across in the area before the fire department could actually get there and, you know, squash whatever needs to be squashed. I think he told me that 9 fires were extinguished last summer in China Hat alone. Any one of those could have been the big one. 2 Septembers ago, we were awoken by the exploding propane tanks and aerosol cans at about 12:30 at night. And there was fire in a 60-foot tall pine tree in the canopy over, I don't know if it was determined to be arson, but it was an RV fire. They got up into the canopy of the trees. And we're packing our bucket bags, like I'm grabbing my son and our pets and we're packing our bags ready to evacuate our home. Because of this fire that started, and luckily the fire department was able to get there and deal with that. Conditions were favorable to that not spread. I've called at least a dozen times in the past 2 years alone on fires. We're talking like 4, 5, 6 of those fires in extreme fire danger season. You know, it's a matter of time. I don't think there's any real debate there. It's a matter of time until a disaster happens with regards to fire. The environmental damage is real. The nonprofit public land stewards, through the donations of community members, local businesses, they do multiple cleanups in the area every year. The leader of that group has told me that in the last 5 years, they've pulled over 1 million pounds of garbage out of the national forest surrounding Bend, over 10,000 pounds of hazardous waste material. This is over 5,000 hours of donated labor and tens of thousands of dollars and donated money and equipment from the community to do this. I asked him if they're making progress. And he says undetermined. He thinks it's being replenished as quickly as they're taking it out for the most part. And I acknowledge that there's plenty of other folks that are not campers out there that are contributing to that problem via illegal dumping. So no question about that. Sandy mentioned burning trash. That's definitely an issue in our neighborhood. Toxic fumes, black water dumping. We've got trash going on at our property all the time. A lot of times we'll see piles of trash down at China Hat where it's like someone's gonna come deal with this eventually. Probably nonprofit organizations that are doing that. And then, of course, deforestation, poaching, you know, it's real. You're getting calls all the time. So, you know, I think it's important to acknowledge, you know, there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle, right? I don't think the solutions we propose here are going to solve homelessness. And I think a lot of the outreach and hands up are a critical and important part of this puzzle. But I think there's also clear and present danger at the same time that we need to find solutions to that while we have more long-term solutions to, you know, address the bigger problem. So I don't think that a few dozen beds, rooms, housing at a time at greater cost is really going to put a dent in what's happening at China Hat. You know, I think shelters that are more affordable, more scalable, are probably reasonable solutions to entertain when it comes to solving the China Hat problem, right? Homelessness and illegal camping in forests obviously related. But I don't think we can wait until we have all of the scars and puzzle pieces aligned to solve homelessness before we address the dangers to the community and to the homeless community that's in the forest now. Thank you.
Perfect segue. That's why we're here today. So thank you. Next, we're going to transition over to Katie Miller to give us sort of a nationwide view.
Yes, I want to thank you all for having us. I want to thank the Crow Board, want to thank Mayor Pro Tem Perkins, Tammy, Holly, for inviting us to join you. I'm here with federal partners. So I'm joined by the USDA, by HUD, the VA, the Forest Service. We are your partners in this work. It's very challenging. While we are here to listen and learn, we also want you to know that, that you have our support in the work of addressing homelessness is very challenging, but solvable. We have found that when we all work together at all levels of government, local, state, and federal, and with providers, outreach teams, neighbors, public health, emergency responders, businesses, through intensive communication and coordination, targeted resources, and working with urgency, we can help people move inside, connect to services, and end the crisis of homelessness. What you are seeing with unsheltered homelessness and encampments in China Hat and other areas around Bend is very challenging. Large encampments are not new to Western cities, but we are seeing more and more of them in smaller and rural communities when housing costs rise quickly and there is little to no access to affordable housing. Nationally, we have invested more in rental assistance and affordable housing in the last 3 years than we have in the last 20 years, though the cost of housing continues to rise. For every 10 people housed, 12 people lose their homes. First-time homelessness is up 30%. We are clear that in order to truly address homelessness, we must end the crisis for those who are experiencing it now, but we must also prevent people from becoming homeless in the first place. As JW mentioned, we will not always agree on everything, but it is critical for the health of our community and for those who are suffering outside that that we work with urgency to move people inside and connect them to the supports that they need in order to heal and move forward in their lives. And so again, you know, we're here to be with you. We recognize that and that we won't always agree, but we are very hopeful by what your community is doing to directly address this head on and work region-wide and together and tackle it person by person.
Thank you, Katie, I appreciate it. Well, now we're gonna move into sort of the meat of this meeting, which is, the solutions-based discussion. There's a few things that came out today and a few things that have come up in conversations. I'll sort of list what I heard, and then I know we want to specifically hear from Brian and from Keith on HUD and NBA. But today I heard, basic services, fuel reduction, fire, environmental impact, did I say basic services, garbage collection, authorized encampments, safe parking, outdoor shelters, outreach, increased outreach, behavioral health. And I'm sure there's more that I'm not getting at, but those are just some of the things that we heard today. Wanted to actually start with HUD, if that's okay, and to talk about a summary of untapped resources that you might be able to provide us and have a little brief conversation from HUD.
Absolutely. Again, thank you very much for inviting us to this table. As your Oregon field office at HUD, we have 50 HUD employees in the state. We are all physically based in Portland at the Portland field office, but we do at least, we do a majority of our work in rural Oregon, in the parts of the state that are not served by a Portland Housing Bureau or a Washington County Department of Housing that has 200 or 300 staff. And so just a quick summary of the resources. Katie mentioned the kind of unprecedented level of resources, and that's mainly due to our friends in Congress and their allocation of funding for housing and homeless services that come through HUD as the executor of those programs. Just to recap for folks, kind of looking at the playing field, because it's all, well, from where we stand, it's all a question of resources. If we had enough resources, we could house everybody, but we'll never have enough resources. And so the communities across the state that have seen success in similar problems and similar issues, it's all come down to alignment. And these conversations, having a CHRO exist, having a continuum of care that's housed within council of governments and just the agencies and the leadership and the citizen participation that's represented. But getting into the resources. So looking at Deschutes County, kind of across Deschutes County, the county specifically, the city of Redmond, the city of Bend, receives about 1.2 million annually in community development block grant funds from HUD, but these go directly to those organizations. Both cities and then the county receives community development block grant funds through the state of Oregon. The Economic Development Agency administers CDBG, Oregon Housing Community Services. For this part of the state is the major pass-through of HUD funding. The Continuum of Care receives about 800,000 annually. Also received another almost $1 million last year in one-time youth homeless development funding. This is nationally competitive funding. The Continuum of Care here was only one of 16 communities nationwide that received this funding. There's an extreme need in this community, but partners at this table have been very successful in attracting outside resources, governor's funding, legislative funding, special one-time funding that's come out. The local housing authority, which again serves this county, administers about 1,261 housing choice vouchers. They also have a variety of special purpose vouchers targeted directly to veterans, to foster youth, emergency housing vouchers. A housing authority has the ability to set a preference for which folks come to the top of the list. Now, all of those vouchers are allocated right now. These are folks that they have their vouchers on the street, but as vouchers come available, the organization can say we're going to set a preference, and many housing authorities across the state do, for a targeted reduction in an encampment at one site. We're going to put some of the folks on the top of the list. I don't want to speak for them because they all have their own preferences. Maybe some of you are on their board or involved in their issues. And we talked a little bit about the first permanent supportive housing project in Bend. This is housing for folks that come similar to veterans vouchers, with case management support and those wraparound supports. The Housing Authority is developing Cleveland Commons, and that's supposed to, open its doors here in the next couple months. I want to talk about the other side, the kind of invisible side where folks usually don't think of HUD or FHA. Within the Deschutes County area, just this year, 114 first-time home buyers were assisted with home mortgages, FHA mortgages. It's about $72 million of loan guarantees for local credit unions, so local folks can buy homes here. Doesn't really affect this situation, but it's the major work that we do is around preventing homelessness and increasing first-time home buyers. So we're not adding to this side of the ledger. And then the last thing I'll talk about, something new outside of HUD's lane, over to our congressional folks, congressionally directed spending, CPF grants have come into this community. One grant in each of the last 3 years, FY 22, 23, 24. I believe there's several in the pipe for 25, about $3.7 million into this community for housing related projects for those as well. So that's kind of just a highlight of where all the resources are. I will say we are absolutely committed. How federal funding works is local organizations get to, we provide the funding and national guidelines and national objectives, but local organizations get to decide what their priorities are and how they spend their funds. And there is a lot of capacity midstream to change. We're funding houseless prevention, or we're funding construction, or we're funding rapid rehousing, we're funding home preservation. There's a lot of capacity to change and say, okay, we want to go a different direction, or some new emerging need has come up and we want to fund something else. And we're your partners and advisors on that, and we have staff for each one of these organizations mentioned. We have HUD staff that are assigned as the portfolio specialists for that, and we're here. And you know, I've seen several of you just 3 times this month, so we'll be out here, and we're absolutely committed. If you want to do something differently with the funds you get from HUD, we'll be there with you every step of the way.
Does anyone have anything that they'd like to add to the HUD discussion? I know we we have something that we always talk about. I don't know, Tammy, you want to, or Eliza, one of the things we talk about, if there is nowhere to go after all of these shelters, if there's no housing available, we're not doing our job. And one of the things that we struggle with is vouchers and in a very high cost of living environment.
I have a comment to make. I had written down prioritization of housing choice vouchers before you said it. I do think that's a tough thing in our region. We don't do that. It's a lottery system. And it's something I talked to HUD about when I visited DC this last March, and to Dr. Cho about whether or not that will be a requirement for the different sides of HUD, and what the continuum care does around prioritization and coordinated entry, and then the requirement for entities to if they're receiving HUD funding to prioritize vouchers. Do you think that will be something that HUD decides to do in the future?
So the first time, so due to COVID, there was, as all of you know, there's ARPA funds, there's all those new funds that came out from COVID. And then the programs that were existing funding through HUD and other federal agencies, there were a lot of waivers and exemptions and kind of new ways to use these funds. And thanks to our folks in Congress, we got a whole new tranche of housing vouchers called emergency housing vouchers, which had a lot less stipulations. They could pay higher rents. They were deployed. I think there were 114 emergency housing vouchers here in the Deschutes County. For the first time, it required the Housing Authority by MOU to coordinate with the continuum of care for a referral process. So this continuum of care sent the Housing Authority, these are the folks on the list. I think as much as we can communicate back to our folks in Congress, like, hey, this worked, like this was a good system, like let's keep this going.
It was very successful in Central Oregon. Yes. Yeah. I will do that. Thank you.
Because we see when you get to decide who's getting those resources. The other thing, we're actually holding an event in Salem next week on this, working with the 3 Salem is unique in Oregon because within the city metro area, it's touched by 3 public housing authorities. So there's a lot of coordination and overlap. But many housing authorities have landlord recruitment campaigns to try to do myth busting or demystify the process from private mom and pop landlords of this is what a housing choice voucher would do if you would consider renting your ADU or you have a duplex or a triplex. This is what the benefits can be. This is how local organizations can help lower your risk for having a housing voucher choice person come in. And then this is how HUD through our partners will pay the bills for your rent. So landlord recruitment campaigns in communities like this where you have 0% vacancy and there's wait lists and there's just, you know, all the vouchers are utilized, but as soon as someone gets a voucher, if they can't even go find a place to rent, a landlord recruitment campaign has been successful as well. We can help out with that.
But Brian, we actually have 11% apartment vacancy now in Bend, 11%. It was 8.7 last October. It's going up. And we have maybe 1,500 more that are going to dump in the system. So somehow we need, Kat and I and Tom Kuhn, or Bill Kuhn, who's the treasurer for Deschutes County, are meeting Monday morning to say, okay, somewhere out of the box, we have got to figure out how we can use some of those empty apartments here because we do have them. They're running ads, they're advertising on the radio. You're hearing it, you see the signs. There are a lot of vacant apartments here. It's not a zero. Redmond is still really, really tight, but Bend is definitely, they're currently overbuilt.
Would absolutely love to go into way more detail on that.
Maybe you can, yes.
We have, within Deschutes County, we have 19 properties, triplexes, all the way up to 20 and more units that have HUD-based contracts. They primarily serve elderly folks or persons with disabled or population-specific families. But these are landlords that have contracts in some or all of their units for HUD project-based rental assistance. And our team that works with that is always looking for, as some of these properties are aging out, and then other organizations that run this are looking to pick up more units. We should absolutely talk about vacancy rates.
Yes, let's talk later because that's great. If you could help us out, that would be, you could be part of the, you know, solving a lot of the housing issues. And then of course they need services provided. You don't just put someone in an apartment and leave them there. You've got to really make sure that they're finding their way. So thank you.
And I'll add that in some communities, where there are high vacancy rates, often they're very high costs. They're not the affordable units. Some cities are creating local, what we call shallow subsidy funds, where they can buy down the rents of units to make them more affordable, to sort of create them as a possibility for people to either graduate to or to. But sometimes the units that are available are the most expensive.
That's, I've got a housing coordinator, and that's what she's finding out is they're high cost.
Yeah.
Apartments.
About $1,000 more than what like a voucher could be used, like it would be approved or, yeah.
But they are advertising on the radio now and they do have summer specials. I mean, because I called some of the numbers to see what is it and you can see the signs if you're gawking around when you're driving. So, and I know you guys own 26 units apartments and I'd love to have the veterans program here or have more. So if there's any way we could get the VA to help them with their program. They have 26 specific apartments for veterans. They need more. We have 17 to 21,000 veterans in the central and with Deschutes, Crook and Jefferson County, and more housing would be wonderful. So
I have a question, and Katie, thank you for mentioning about communities that have a pot of funds that they can use to offset some of the costs. So Brian, thank you for being here. One of the questions I have is, with voucher-based placements, it's our understanding, and maybe this is incorrect, that we can't augment that payment if someone, let's say I have a voucher and I have a unit that's available, but the unit is $1,300 and my voucher's for $995. Is there a mechanism that allows us to pay, many individuals that we're replacing are working and they can pay for that cost, but the voucher helps them to be able to pay for all their other expenses.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that, and are there communities that are making that work too, because we do have those funds available.
Right. What Tammy's talking about is if we were to, vouchers are based on an individual's income. And if you make too much money, like it requires an annual recertification. And if your income rises, which is what we all the collective we all want, the downside is you lose your voucher, then it will go to someone else. So direct subsidies to the individuals puts them at risk of losing their voucher. We have seen success with intermediaries or other organizations working with landlords to buy down like what is this unit going for before it gets to the individual in the voucher, things like master lease agreements, things like that. We could absolutely talk about that and share where we've seen that work in Oregon.
Okay, in the interest of moving us all along, it sounds like this is something that might potentially be a future subcommittee slash, just another conversation that we can continue. So thank you very much. I want to get to you, Keith, so that you can share a little bit about VA and
Sure.
resources there.
I'm gonna start outside my lane in Bryan, for just a second, which is I want to call attention to work I've done locally with Colleen Sinsky, who I assume many people in the room know. And that's calling attention to the continuum of care formula and how it disadvantages a lot of communities on the West Coast very much, including Bend. That is a longer term, bigger picture piece, but I hope that Ben will keep it on the list. Push, I will continue to try to help with that, but it's like communities that are kind of newer in terms of their presence in the COC formula that have a lot of unsheltered homelessness. They aren't factored the same as the existing permanent 4,000 basis that funding goes to. The emergency housing grant was done with a different formula. It actually incorporated unsheltered numbers. A lot more money got pushed to West Coast communities. So if I could simply copy that or at least adopt that, it would make a big difference. I'll keep the veteran piece fairly brief. There may be many veterans in the tri-counties. There aren't that many homeless veterans. When you look at the point in time count, for instance, relative to.
We did have 100, that was like the number a couple of years ago. And then, we moved on 35 from our Veterans Village, which is an amazing partner. So I don't know, JW, how many do you think we have out there now?
Well, I'm gonna say we're still pushing well over 100. A lot of them don't want to identify, and it's easy to say, this is what the point in time count, and we all know point in time count is not spot on. We know that veterans are non-veterans, so, and I'm just guessing.
And the point, trust me, I've spent my whole career in the VA. I'm not trying to minimize the number of veterans that the issue I was going to raise is that, first of all, VA can only serve veterans and veterans family members. It's a statutory limitation, so that we can only help you with the veterans component. My understanding from talking to staff here is it's a relatively small staff. There's 3 social workers here at the Bend Clinic and a supervisor. It sounds like the VA actually relies on community for outreach and for temporary housing. I don't love that model. Nationally, veterans are far better resourced than the general homeless population. Our budget per capita is significantly greater than what that can do and other agencies can do. We should be carrying all of our weight and then some. And so what I'm hoping to do coming out of this is sort of listen for where the places are where we can assist. Perhaps we could have a dedicated outreach worker that could be part of the work China Hat and elsewhere. They've only had a couple veteran referrals come out of China Hat over the past couple of years, but every one of those is ones we should pick up, not depend on what community outreach teams to do. Same with temporary and transitional housing. Every bed a veteran's in that could have been a veteran bed is taken away a bed from someone else. So that's the niche I'm listening for and watching for, is making sure we're carrying all of our weight, doing our part, so that the rest of the general resources can go where they're most needed.
Great, thank you, appreciate that. I'm just gonna keep moving us along, and we can always, circle back at the end when we talk about next steps, but wanted just to really open it up right now, especially, I don't know if you all had a chance to look at this, but this is a really helpful one pager on just some strategies that we can be using with our encampments, and see how maybe we can tie some of that into our discussion right now about, what are things that we can do now in terms of either providing basic services or doing cleanups, or fuels reduction, and what are some ideas for the future. And just wanted to open it up, or I can keep talking, or, if anyone that wanted to start with thoughts, ideas, direction. Yeah.
I want to chime in because we've heard from HUD and VA and wanted to bring USDA to the table.
Yes.
One, so thank you for the invitation. I've been really enjoying this conversation. And actually, what Keith was talking about was very much the same for us, is that, you know, while we have a lot of resources, we're limited by location, right? Being rural development. And one of the things we want to be able to do is just kind of listen to see, like, where can we come in? And so, like, I was thinking about Colleen and talking about the mobile street psychiatry and thinking about, is there an opportunity for us here? I also want to bring in my colleagues, Marty Hoffman and Joe Reese, thinking about, like, we have this is learning telemedicine, where there might be opportunities to be able to, because you talk about limited capacity, this might be a place where we'd be able to have, just make a little bit of capacity, but to be able to help out. The other thing I want to talk about, and I appreciate Linda's policy about not setting up a nonprofit. One of the things that I haven't heard yet is about nonprofit groups, private sector, where can they come and where can they? And so some of the things that I've been heard about, there's Project Turkey has done a lot of work. And so, while it might be just a few places, a few places throughout Oregon, think about, okay, here are things that have been happening that have been good. How do we scale up? How do we take lessons from it and build up from that? Are there public resources? Are there private resources? There's also a company called Pallet Shelter that does these unconventional shelters. I think they have 5 here in Bend, but they're all throughout the country. Is that a place that we could, bring to the table? Again, yeah, we'll have to think about that. And so those are some of the things when we start talking about solutions, that is not just on us. And so, and I appreciate JW's point about breaking down silos. What it, the USDA rep usage, and one of the exciting things is meeting people from HUD, from VA, HHS. HHS could be really helpful here in some of the things that they're working on. And just like having these conversations, working with Forest Service, talking with them, and, they, oh, here's something that we know about that you may not have learned about. And so kind of really want to encourage this group to be able to, like, talk about where can we work together, and then also more importantly, where the barriers where we can't work together. And then that might be some work to talk to our congressional partners, say, hey, here's a statute working that's been causing a barrier. Is it something we can break down to work further? But then what I'm passing to my colleague Margie to be able to bring the Oregon perspective.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting us into this conversation. Rural development is one of over 60 sub-agencies of the United States Department of Agriculture, and we're focused on community and economic development. So, and we're the only federal agency that exclusively serves rural. The largest jurisdiction that we work in is 50,000 people. And so when Mega's talking about our limitations in terms of where we can serve, that's one of the biggest limitations that we have. The 2 things that I've heard about today are our distance learning telemedicine program. So we've seen this with like farm laborers, where a nonprofit organization will purchase 50 Chromebooks and distribute them throughout, so that those farm laborers have access to telemedicine services if they can't get from where they're living into telehealth. And so that could be a really interesting connection point on the programmatic side. A lot of what we do, then I want to talk about the spectrum of housing programs. We have a community facilities program that can fund transitional housing. We're working on a transitional housing project in Cave Junction right now. And it also could be leveraged, like nonprofits can apply for that to build housing as well. And so depending on if you could build more and where you want to build, that could be a really useful tool for local governments, nonprofits, et cetera. We also, then you think about the continuum of housing, right? So we get people into transitional housing, and then HUD can come in and get them into rental housing. One of the biggest, we do about $500 million a year investing in Oregon, give or take, given just depending on what Congress gives us. One of the largest portfolios that we do is getting people into first-time home ownership. So we have a mortgage program essentially that provides direct mortgages to low and very low income individuals who are getting into home ownership for the first time. And then we also have a program, it's one of my favorites, called the Mutual Self-Help Program, where we give a grant to a nonprofit to do two things. One is it like a Habitat for Humanity style project where they want to build 4 to 20 houses. We give a grant to the nonprofit to find the families who are gonna purchase the homes, construct the homes, put in 65% sweat equity, and also oversee construction to make sure that we're constructing safe homes for people to move into. And then the homeowners actually use our mortgage program to pay for the cost of constructing, and then they flip it into a 30-year mortgage on the back end. And then, so that's a way to get people from that rental housing into home ownership, where we have available housing supply is a huge issue, as all of us living here know. And then we also have a program, so you think about mobile home parks, which are oftentimes getting to the point where you have a private owner of that and they are aging out and want to sell it. We have a grant that that mobile home owners have used to create a collaborative. So they actually all band together, they create a collaborative, and they purchase their mobile home park from whoever the private owner was. And it's a way to preserve that lower income housing. So we have in our communities built into the fabric a full spectrum of housing opportunities for people depending on where they are on that spectrum of housing. We also have infrastructure, community infrastructure that supports all of that: broadband, water, sewer, waste. And so I think, again, similar to Brian's point and to Keith's point and Benga's, like, we're listening for what are the solutions that you would like to see as a community? And then how can we help support and accelerate that work? So again, just thank you for inviting us into the conversation.
Well, thank you.
Nick Strader with Congressman Bent. One of the points that I'd like to make, and we've been working with this with Commissioner Dare for 5 years on this. Congressman Bent has been in the Congress for 3.5 years, but some of us staff were with his predecessor before, Mr. Walden. But one of the points that's sort of frustrating on our end from an oversight perspective on the public land angle is, and the theme that came up throughout a lot of this today, is we haven't, in terms of China Hat alone, we haven't been able to quantify what the actual problem is out there. And Holly, we've done, dozens of meetings over the years. We've asked, several years ago, how many people are we talking about? How many camps are we talking about? How many acres are we talking about? And we've asked this 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, And so when the city of Bend takes action, moves people off a Hunnell, when ODOT takes action, moves people off of right of ways, we don't know, are they going to China Hat or are they not? Are we making progress? JW's group removed 30,000 pounds of trash out there. Adam talked about moving a lot more than that. But if we're adding 1 million to Adam's point each year, are we making progress? And so one of the things that Congressman Betts wanted me to, deliver today is how do we quantify the problem in China Hat so we can actually see if we're making progress. And we've been, to this point, and Holly, you know this, we've been frustrated because we've been unable to get any data whatsoever on the trends on China. So in terms of people, in terms of camps, in terms of acreage.
The only way to do that is to involve the homeless themselves. They come themselves. Send people in from the outside, and that's just a moving, gigantic piece, lots of moving.
It's a movement target.
Again,
Well,
many of them.
And you can't even get to all the areas out there.
You have to involve that.
Everybody's talking about numbers and we can give you roughs, but I've been doing this for over 10 years. And there's no way to get to every single camp out there.
And you can't.
And they don't want you to.
Well, Linda, thanks for sharing your story. I mean, you talked between 300 and 400. Sandy talked between milepost 2 and milepost 10. But, it'd be helpful just to get some sort of a, quantification, because then you can see what's working and what's not working. And most importantly, are we actually making progress?
I almost don't like getting counted. However, that I've been involved in their own solution, in the solution, that's not unknown. There's ways, but you can't treat them like, they're numbered, they're like they're marbles you can count and put in a bowl. It's not just like that. You have to have a relationship to build it, just like these people in this room are working together by building relationships. the same dynamic can happen and the same results can come if you take that approach. To get the quantification that you're looking for.
Perfect.
To add to the solutions that we're starting to bring together, you're exactly right. So nationally, some of the best practices are around creating by name lists and person-centered outreach. And so knowing, because each individual, their solution out of homelessness is going to be different. And so understanding what you're up against and knowing people by name is a national best practice. I also want to say I love the idea of this peer navigation. And there are some states that have 1115 Medicaid waivers, which Oregon has put through that can bill Medicaid for peer navigation. And so there are some, so looking at federal and as we look at how we bring together all of these resources, one thing to look at is the Medicaid waiver for Oregon and whether peer navigation can be built in Medicaid, and who then could be the umbrella organization that could support that billing of Medicaid.
And thank you for raising that, and our CCO, our coordinated care organization, is at the table for a lot of the more regional conversations too, so that's.
I have one other question. So, in terms of, the chief of the Forest Service on June 4th, Holly, in DC, in the Natural Resources Committee, in a public land subcommittee, Chief Moore testified to Congressman Benz that there was an tentative agreement reached in the Bend area regarding homelessness. That was on June 4th. What agreement is he referring to, and who are the parties of that agreement?
I'm not sure, honestly. I wasn't there, but to your previous question, I think the numbers that we get from providers and what we see on the ground is we know roughly 110, 130 camps are the numbers that were there. It's seasonally sometimes it goes up and down, but it's been fairly static. It doesn't mean it's the same people. You don't know that, but it's been, I would say, static in that number.
And I'd like to just do a little plug for the CHRO here. One of our strategic priorities is better data and communicating that data with the public. So that we understand the problem better, and that's something that we are actually going to be talking about in a few minutes at our CHRO board meeting, and how we can help invest in that data, because it's not easy to get, it's not easy to do, but we all know that the point in time count is an imperfect count, and we want to look at more by name lists so that we can have a better understanding of what we're dealing with.
Can I second that? So, the COC is actively working with partners, the CHRO, other partners, to have a really comprehensive by name list. Obviously, I have to say Neighbor Impact as well as our data lead. We do the point in time count out in China Hat and throughout the region. We have many partners who go out there to do outreach regularly. We have an outreach committee that just gave me some information about it, and it's the same similar estimates between 200 to 400 people, the camps, and there are people going out there, providers going out there doing the work. I do think though that there are so many camps out in the trees, and just the ability to get an accurate count with the pick count, get an accurate count just daily. It is too much for even the 4 or so providers that are doing regular outreach out there. And we agree it would be helpful. And I agree with Linda that perhaps even around the point in time count, working with the folks who are living out there to do the point in time count, even with our providers who spend hours and days out there during that week that we count, it's just not enough. And so thank you for raising that, Linda, and we agree.
But I would love to hear from perhaps Mark or Captain Bailey on what their number estimate is, because you guys are still talking estimates. Like a year ago, I tried to ask, what is the pit count for China Hat? Nobody could give me any kind of an answer. And I'm going, okay, is somebody really out there counting?
I think Ben gave us an answer when we presented to the group a couple weeks ago. I can have him send you that.
But I would just love to hear from somebody that's actually working on these 449 calls. I mean, surely Mark has somewhat of an idea.
I look to the real Captain Bailey before I set up, but thank you for the question, though. One way we could even quantify this in a very broad stroke right now would be to look at, a map that I believe like you're showing Commissioner about the 911 calls out there. Many of these calls, it's my feeling, are both county deputies and some of our officers. They could stem from, I probably generated 3 of those dots this morning myself, if we took a map as of current as of right now. And out there on community policing contacts. But largely that would show sort of the scope and scale of where many of these camps are. We have taken the time, you know, I think it's been a critical tool, the point in time count. We have taken time out of our patrol days and nights, to go out and assist point in time, not just in the China Hat area, but writ large in Deschutes County. Our officer out of the Pine area, Gilchrist area, Sean Rady participates. I've been out there trying to work the hinterlands, if you will, of China Hat when I was an officer. To try to get data, to call, working with your folks to get data on maybe not the front country along China Hat that they were covering, but going off into what we call, you know, back of the trees, so to speak. But yeah, we have not attempted to generate we have maps that we use internally that will capture areas that we have been or what we've noticed. And we'll have employees come to us, say, hey, we saw this, so we'll follow up on that. But, you know, in the last year and a half, this data is a couple months old, but in the last year and a half, our officers, whether just one of us or 4 of us together, we're out in the area of 447 calls, if you will. And like I say, that stems from everything from somebody just maybe.
We have to wrap up soon, so I also wanted, there's a difference between 911 calls and people that are living in China Hat, and I just want to, that is not the same number. So I just want to make sure that we are going from that.
And just in conclusion, is there a way, Holly, to get a follow-up from Chief Moore on that agreement that he talked about in DC and the committee on what?
I'd like to focus on solutions, and maybe you two can talk offline, not in this environment that we're having right now. We're here to talk about what we can do, and I want to make sure that we're not criticizing and we're talking about how we can pool all of our resources here. We do have to start wrapping up. And I'll bring up a couple things that I saw today, some really exciting opportunities, I think, for future conversations, and please correct me or add things that I'm forgetting. You know, one thing I think is how can we support the fuels reduction work that you're doing and the work that you're doing, Captain Bailey, with delivering fire extinguishers to help protect not only the people that are living in China Hat, but the neighborhoods around it. And what are future conversations that we can have about that? I think this peer navigation model that sort of leverage existing resources and getting people to help engage on China Hat that have lived in China Hat. I think that's a really exciting opportunity, and it sounds like there may be some potential funding that we could look at for that.
I just need to know who to talk.
Yes, we will. Yeah, we will.
Who's the person, who's got the book?
Exactly. It sounds like that there's potential for to help fund some future some expanded outreach to China Hat for service providers too. That sounds really promising. What am I forgetting that else we talked about? Please remind me.
Vacancy rates, master lease.
Yes, oh yes, sorry, and then there's the future HUD conversations, future conversations with the VA about how we can make sure that the VA is taking care of the veterans so that it frees up other beds and housing for people that are not veterans.
And how USDA can help too.
And how USDA can help. So what am I forgetting? Is there anything else that we talked about today? This is the beginning of.
That we can tap rural development funds here in Bend.
Yes, maybe not here in Bend, but outside.
Well,
China.
Right.
Yes. And is there anything else that we talked about that we need to, that I didn't summarize? And this is the beginning of I think a lot of different conversations, and I think we'll make sure that everybody here can communicate with each other and that we have more conversations on these specific topics, because as you know, as we saw today, it's absolutely impossible to get to the end of this. But I think this is a really, really great start. If anyone else has any, final thoughts that they'd like to add, I just thank you so much for being here today and for starting this conversation.
I'd like to add one if I could.
Absolutely.
One of the things that's missing, I think, is a more, a wider array of, different kinds of solutions to house people. Like, I know people that are not gonna get out of China unless they get into a situation that fits them.
Yeah.
Right? So tiny houses, I need to put my magic mechanic man in a that he can fix cars in, and maybe even live there too. You know, and we need tiny houses, and we need managed camp, and we need unmanaged camps, and we need safe parking, we need all of it in order to be able to fit enough individual needs and convince people that, well, yeah, maybe that would be kind of cool instead of turning that. Not so much dust.
Absolutely.
So that, to emphasize that, is a range, huge range, certainly, I'd love to know if we ever find a tiny house village, a tiny home village here.
I think the data, especially coming out of COVID, absolutely supports long-term retention rates and keeping people housed requires the broad spectrum of emergency, transitional, tiny house villages, all the way to vouchers in a regular market rate building. So
Yay!
And I think we're seeing really unique opportunities here in the state too, like you can have the impact of our timber communities and the availability of modular mass timber housing as a solution that benefits not just getting people into home ownership, but also helps with the restoration of a forest-based economy with fuels, like all of the work that we need to do for fuel thinning. And so I think there's a lot of really unique opportunities that we're seeing in Oregon right now that could be leveraged as part of the solution.
And I do want to thank Adam and Sandy coming today for representing the hundreds and hundreds of homeowners that have been dealing with this for the last at least 5 years, and it's only gotten worse. So I really appreciate that they brought to you the urgency. If we ever have a wind that's 70 miles an hour from the northeast again, like we had September of 2020, that's not going to be a pretty picture if we do have a fire that starts out there. I know Holly originally you didn't really want people to go way out in the forest. And if you look on the map, we've got calls that are actually going pretty far out now in the China Hat area. So we've got a situation that is a bit of a tinderbox.
Can I just add, Linda's point about a variety of different solutions to provide options to people, certainly very important, but I think we also need to acknowledge that there's a piece of this population that will not accept help. If there's a tiny house for them, they're going to stay at the house. What is the long-term plan? What are solutions we can start talking about for that portion of the population as we slow roll towards more housing that helps prevent people from being there in the first place, other people, into transitional housing, back on their feet. What about the folks that refuse that help? Because it's an objective reality.
Well, you have to be able to offer it to them first.
Sure.
Okay, well, we're not there yet.
And I'm cautious not to get stereotyping, we don't have relationships built. There's a lot of people that are living in China have been moved multiple times that have experienced a lot of trauma and may not outwardly, if a police officer comes to them, accept help. But you have to build that relationship and build that trust. That's just it, yeah. And I think I look at this strategies, and the number one is engage encampment residents in efforts to develop solutions, and I think that's what we talked a lot about here today. So I just want to also sort of end with I've said this 1,000 times in talking about this, but this is a collective responsibility thing. People are living in China Hat due to so many different reasons and different forces from local, state and federal areas. And so I think it's so great that we're all here today to really talk about our responsibility in this picture and in this situation that we have in China Hat, and also how we can move forward. And if there's any other final thoughts, I think we are gonna take a picture. Is that right, Nikki?
Yeah.
Okay, if that's okay, a group shot.
We'll have to go outside.
Oh, okay, okay, we're gonna just, and just, there is lunch, there is lunch if anyone is hungry. We have a few minutes before we transition to our board meeting. Thank you for being here.
I was, I, we bought a house. When I was
I'm starting to be now. Thank you so much. We have an hour allocated for our agenda at this moment in time. It's now 12:02. I will just mention the minutes. Did everyone read the minutes from the last meeting? Could I have a motion to approve those minutes, please?
I move to approve the minutes from our June 13th meeting.
I second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. So now let's go to public comment. We have 20 minutes set aside, 2 minutes per person. So is there anyone in the room that would like to make some public comments? Anyone in the room? Okay. You need to come up to the table and identify yourself and for the record and all that. So you love
Unless you like one of these names.
So I'm Lynn Wyman, I'm a member of the Unitarian Universalist Homeless Outreach Project. I'm also a volunteer with Shepherd's House. I go out to visit China Hat every week with the share band. So 2 quick comments. One of them is the problems that the neighbors have with China Hat, the housed neighbors. Well, those, the unhoused people have all of those same problems. When a RV burns up and the housed people are afraid their house is gonna burn, that's something that will burn. So the solution that I hear most, the other comment is the solution that I hear mostly about developing subsidized housing and more, more apartments. Those are pretty long-term solutions, and it's gonna take years to have enough housing for all the people in China Hat. And I think we really need a much quicker solution. We need managed camps that will impact people quickly, and will give people in China Hat an alternative to the whole living situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else in the room? Yes. Hi. Thank you for joining us.
My name is Chuck Hemingway. I'm a board member with Home Board Network, which is a new nonprofit that engages in street outreach in China Hat and Juniper Ridge, and elsewhere within the city of Bend. I'm also on the board of Central Oregon Villages, which manages an outdoor shelter of 20 units in East Bend, the east part of Bend, called Desert Springs Village. I want to thank the COIC people and CHRO board for putting together this program and starting this conversation, and I'm encouraged vastly about where this might go. And I also wanted to express appreciation to the COIC and CHRO for putting together the RFQ process that really, I think, has opened a lot of people's eyes and identified a number of ways of creating additional safe parking and managed camps. And it wouldn't have been possible without the interest and the initiative displayed by CHRO, the board, and by the COIC staff. So thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Anyone else in the room? Anyone else to say something at this moment? Okay, Angie, do we have any raised hands?
Linda Mirror.
Okay,
Mirror.
Linda? Is she unmuted?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. Hello, my name is Linda Muir and I live in Southwest Bend. First, I would like to thank the CHRO board under the leadership of Commissioner Adair for hosting this incredibly important discussion. And many thanks to all of you on the panel for devoting your valuable time to try and help us find some attainable solutions. As a volunteer, I've spent several hours in the encampments in China Hat during the last year. During this time, I learned the following from the campers themselves in the encampments. Number one, we were informed there's active drug and human trafficking in China Hat. Number two, we were warned to stay away from certain encampment areas due to criminal behavior in those areas. Bad actors are hiding amongst the ones who are struggling. We were told, number three, that it's important for the women to live in groups with men due to the risk of sexual violence. One of the women we spoke with had been attacked and raped. Number four, we were told that there are bodies buried in China Hat that no one will ever find. Number five, we were told by some that they were previously camping inside the city limits and were told they could not stay and should move out to China Hat or Juniper Ridge by local law enforcement. Number six, we were told and saw many trees are getting harvested to use as firewood in the camps. We were told that many deer are being killed to be used for food. We saw lots of evidence of encampments, fires, trees, RVs, and cars. Based on our findings and the 911 data for the past 3.5 years, it is evident that China Hat is an extremely unsafe environment for those who are camping there and the homeowners nearby. The escalation of crime and dangerous behavior in our U.S. Forest Service land is posing a serious public safety risk in addition to a human environmental crisis. I propose that the U.S. Forest Service close China Hat under an emergency order, assess what the needs are of the current campers so they can be moved to a safer setting in a managed camp in order to be helped and get transitioned into safer permanent housing. Those who refuse to go should be trespassed and told to leave. Once the area is safe and secure, it should be open for day use only. Additionally, I propose that the nonprofits servicing the homeless in our area should be better monitored in terms of spending and results. Regular audits and performance metrics should be implemented so that the public can be informed about how well the programs are doing with our public money. Currently, we have a system that promotes a tribal behavior by providers, all vying for the same funding and a major lack of transparency. This needs to be fixed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Linda. Anyone else?
Jessica Gamble.
Okay, Jessica Gamble. Thank you, Jessica.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, first of all, thank you so much, Patty, for the introduction and shout out at the beginning of this meeting. And thank you, Chuck, for all of the hard work that you do with Homeware Network. And thank you for being there in person today. So my name is Jessica Gamble. I'm the executive director and founder of Homeware Network, a nonprofit in Bend dedicated to serving unhoused populations in Deschutes County. With over 2.5 years of lived experience without housing myself, starting at China Hat in the summer of 2019, I'm deeply passionate about helping our unhoused neighbors to work towards stable housing. Currently, Homeware Network serves 170 unhoused clients in Deschutes County, 63 of whom reside at China Hat, including 7 children. We provide essential services to address the gaps in care within our local homeless assistance system, focusing on barriers such as financial instability, medical vulnerabilities, and transportation challenges. Having personally experienced the struggles of navigating the system, I have seen firsthand the need for collaboration among service providers and the lack of resources available to help clients overcome barriers to housing. This is why Homeware Network is committed to bring together different organizations to better serve our community and provide vital support such as vehicle-related expenses and temporary motel stays. By working together and supporting programs like Homeware Network, we can make a real difference in the lives of those experiencing homelessness, particularly at China Hat. For those of you that are not familiar with that are not familiar with Homeware Network, we have our very first program that was funded back in November through Central Oregon Health Council. Is called the China Hat Integrity Initiative. So please feel free to reach out to us to learn more about that or go on our website, homewarenetwork.org, to see the work that we're doing out there. Part of what we're doing out there is bringing together service providers and outreach outposts so that we can actually begin to work together in collaboration, being face-to-face with the folks that are experiencing homelessness and surviving living in the forest out there. Together, we can create a more holistic and effective approach to ending homelessness in our community. in the time that we've been funded, we've been able to house 12 individuals. And that wasn't through rapid rehousing. That wasn't through the coordinated entry system. All that was helping people at their most vulnerable moments to work through barriers so that they could support themselves in getting housed. I believe if we're able to support people working through barriers, through comprehensive case management, addressing their fundamental needs, we'll be able to help people get housed much sooner than waiting for affordable housing to be built. I think one of the important things to remember is that people that are experiencing homelessness are human and need to be treated with dignity and respect first and foremost. A lot of the folks that we work with welcome us with open arms out at China Hat. They've been very respectful. I think in the entire time that we've been serving out there, I think only 2 people have ever been on drugs or alcohol. Most of the people are sober. Most of the people were working individuals that fell on hard times, are experiencing medical vulnerabilities or limitations in transportation, to be able to facilitate getting housed. So we are happy to help lead the efforts out at China Hat as boots on the ground and bringing together our community, instilling hope for the folks that are experiencing homelessness out there. We welcome anyone that's interested in collaborating with us, whether you're a nonprofit service provider or a community member, to join forces with us in helping people get housed. Thank you for your time and your support.
Thank you, Jessica, for what you're doing, and the fact that I know that you looked out there in 19 really is impactful to your mission. So thank you for joining us today. Is there anyone else? No. Okay, all right. So I believe we can then go on with our agenda. As listed, we have direction on shelter 5 funding.
Yes, thank you, Chair Adair. So in the packet, you will, in front of you, hopefully everyone has a packet. We have drafted some memos on all of the decision points that we're hoping to get some guidance on today. So the first one is the discussion that we held on the 13th, talking about the shelter pod funding to purchase units or pods. The funding can be used. This is the funding from the governor's office. We have 1.1 million to invest. And that is directly related to pods of whatever nature the individual project would be in need of. It also can be used for some of the infrastructure that might be necessary as well. We also stated that there is a bit of a delta between pod structures and what might be needed in terms of cost. They can be anywhere from 6,000 to 25,000, anywhere in between. So looking for some guidance, maybe a little bit of flexibility to be able to negotiate with the RFQ project sponsors, to, which would be with the jurisdictions themselves, and the jurisdictions are working with the actual nonprofit or entity that's going to be on the ground. And so before you is a memo with a recommendation.
I just want to say how this is a really exciting opportunity for us. I've been doing a lot of reading about micro shelters and how successful they are. And so I think this is really great that we are able to distribute them basically through the CHRO. And I mean, to me, it makes sense because the cost varies so much to go with sort of the average cost per unit. That's my preference. I think it just makes it the easiest, but I know there are other options. We'd love to hear from the rest of you.
I think it would be nice to give some flexibility, just because we know some of the projects may already have some existing units, and we, you know, they might want the units to be similar. Whether so they can to outlast the weather, and while something may be a little more expensive, also the cost of building things in Central Oregon is really expensive. So just thinking about that as well.
I'm gonna agree, because it's the site infrastructure for each of these projects that you're thinking about. You don't know what the hard pan is, what the availability of the utilities are gonna be. I mean, what we had to go through just with Oasis Village and negotiating with ODOT to get power under the road and offset costs for that. You know, making sure we have access for the proper emergency lanes. We're still waiting for the left turn lane to get more things done out there before 3. So I think it's an average cost is really not going to be the correct approach, because the average is kind of pie in the sky, depending on where you are. So I would like to see a more fluid models for that.
I like the wording where she's, maybe this is what you're saying, Pat, not to exceed per shelter staff recommending 20,000. I know they had some that were nicer in Portland, that were like 24,000, but maybe that's a little bit too extravagant. But then again, I'm looking for landscaping, for someone that will do landscaping for Oasis Village. So having that conversation on a daily basis.
Yeah, so it's like the not to exceed, but then what do you do? Because if that's just your shelter unit, what is it about the rest of what's going on there? Because you're talking individual units, individual pods, and it's gonna be much more for the whole project to fit into the community.
Right.
I think the language is restrictive and limiting it to an actual.
And you will have an opportunity to also consider augmenting this funding with some of the unrestricted pro funding that you also have. Because I know that this pool of funding, the governor's intention was more toward, at least my understanding from the conversations, toward the pods, and the infrastructure really, as we know, could be vastly outside that, which might make it cost prohibitive in certain areas. And so this bucket of funds may not be able to really do all of that infrastructure for each of those projects.
And it also says if extenuating circumstances arise.
Right.
I see a little flexibility there. I thought it was a little high to begin with, and then, but then thinking, we don't want these in 10 years to look like shacks and shambles and places that people they don't want that kind of thing in their community. We want it to be something that everybody can be proud of and that will keep its value. So I think a good investment is worthwhile.
I kind of feel that a quality investment is worthwhile, not really an expensive investment. Something that's tailored to each location that they need to go in, but yet interoperable in case something needs to be moved from one location to another location. They should be semi-compatible, you know? Who's to say that this location is gonna exist forever, you know? So I don't think anything in permanency in one location is the right thing. I think something that could be moved from one location to another if needed would be the sensible thing of quality standard that it's durable.
I think that's a great point because we do know some of the properties are not able to be used long-term, so that's a good point.
And just to clarify, so these are tier 1 and tier 2. So Tammy, can you remind us the four projects that were tier 1 and tier 2? Okay, I think that might be really good. This Oasis Village.
Yes.
Central Oregon Villages.
Yes.
John's house.
Yep.
Central Oregon Villages for the 97 property
Yes.
and the safe
Park. Yes.
Okay.
And so we would be working on your behalf with the jurisdiction in which those projects, because they actually have the approval process. And then we'd be working with that project sponsor as well. And then we negotiate just like all of the other funding that we've negotiated on behalf of the executive order funding.
Now, the Central Oregon Villages project says it needs $1 million for startup and 1 year of operation. And it's a tier 2. And I know the county, because we're incredibly concerned about moving off of East Antler and Juniper Ridge expenditures to clean those up. I don't believe that we can fill in, you know, with the 1.5 million that we allocated. We said, no, we can't do it for the villages. So that other money is gonna have to come from somebody else.
Okay. So again, that would be part of the negotiation. This, at least if there were pod structures that would be required, would be able to be utilized as part of that budget.
So I'm just telling you, that's gonna be,
Okay.
it is $1 million in startup. But the good news is Oasis.
That's the 97 one? You're talking about,
Yeah, Oasis Village, they're asking for 494,000 startup, but that would include what, 10 at 60, so less 65,000, if that's really what their plots are gonna cost. And then the Central Oregon Villages, they want 210,000, so I don't know if they're asking for any plots there.
I don't recall. I don't know on that particular, I don't know that they are, but we will work with each project sponsor and be able to get the budgeted funds to them.
Okay, so do we need a vote, a motion? Please,
So before we go on your option list, Tammy, here you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bullets under options, but they seem to be integrated. Why don't you run through that and clarify, because we're talking 2 that we have here. And I would like to be clear.
Sure, so those were the options that were brought to you at the last meeting.
Correct.
And then I provided a recommendation just to offer some support. And so you could determine what you're doing right now, which is an average cost, and then we just leave it at that. You could also determine an average cost, and then allow for in conjunction with some of the other funding. So that helps with negotiating the true project cost of the entire project. You could, and I didn't draft up these original options, so I'm adding some life to them. So then in coordination with each project sponsor, you could identify a total cost and contract with directly to the project sponsor. What that would be doing would be going around the jurisdiction. I wouldn't recommend doing that because the contract would be with the jurisdiction, not necessarily with the project sponsor. And then administer the funds essentially just within the guidelines. So a little, that one's just sort of open field running. And I probably wouldn't go that direction either. So hence the recommendation being narrowing that down, giving the project jurisdictions and sponsors some idea of what they have to work with. We're not looking for something that's going to be permanent, but we also want it to be safe and habitable for a period of time. And allowing some flexibility with extenuating circumstances if there's a negotiation outside that cost parameter. And again, knowing that we've made a commitment to the governor's office of around 65 units. That's fungible in a way because that was an approximate at the time. So again, working within those boundaries. If there's a question, you're welcome to push back or I can add. What we're trying to do is make sure that we have the ability to get the dollars out the door and not need to wait to come back to make decisions. But if there is something that is outside what kind of seems normal, we would want to bring it back to you because it really is your decision.
That's how we've done it in the past, and how the Oasis Village and all the other things happen. I guess my thought process is, it's just not encompassing. The project gets approved, then move forward to communicate with the locality, and in the process of doing that, if it falls apart, then it's on to the next item on the tier.
So it would be up to so for the city of Redmond, any project that is approved in your community, I'd be working directly with you. And our team would be working together. And then if the project were just determined that the jurisdiction or the project sponsor, it can't go forward, then the dollars go back into the fund. And in really each project, when they were ranked and approved by this body, it was the next step is really.
It is, it's just, there's a lot of extra verbiage in here, the way it's worded. It's good. It's just, it kind of goes full circle.
I think that it's important that this helps us stand up the RFQ work that we did.
Correct.
And
And we're just bypassing the extra RFP process.
Exactly.
We're just putting the word back in the
Yeah.
CLSC, which I'm not, again, that's probably where I'm torn, because I would like to have things vetted out.
Okay.
Before it gets to the city, but I'm not gonna speak for the city, because I'm just one of 7. So, I mean, that's really what I see. You know, you're gonna do now, you're gonna bring us quote unquote a vetted project.
Well, actually, no, the project sponsor would be working with the city, so your team would be coming to us saying, we have a project. So whatever outreach, community engagement, whatever process the community that you have, you work that and let us know what it is.
And that's no different than how we've done things in the past. It just seems to me that this, like I said, a lot of extra words for how we've been doing things in Redmond.
Okay.
Take that back for other people. But, so yes, that's fine.
The important thing I think about these pods though, is the fact that weather kills homeless people 7 times more than, summer, even though the heat could be awful. Really the cold, and it's like, we just can't buy cheap little things that maybe.
No, they have to be well insulated.
Yeah,
Because
they
what you'll find is as soon as you build these pods, it's not the winter weather, it's the fact that you have a door that opens and a small upper window and you don't have airflow, and then they're going to have heat stroke in the summer. So we're going to have well insulated, thoughtful process in what we're building, because none of that changes how we live in Central Oregon. It gets super hot during the day, it's chilly at night. Do we have a community center where they can at least get respite in the summertime?
The good news about the Veterans Village though is that they actually have the windows that could have air, heating and air conditioning units in each one of the cabins. So that's something that they didn't put in initially, but it was quickly added. And I think they were like $400 or something.
It's a great thought to think about. Something as we're going forward, lessons learned over here can be applied, all the way through.
And so you'll be able to determine that, and beautification or anything that, all of that is determined by the entity in which a project would reside. Yeah.
I would love to, for our federal people out here, I'd love to hear your thoughts too.
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk to you more about this because we see tiny houses all over the country and things like mold are a big issue. And while something may be cheaper going in, it doesn't last very long and can be a dangerous place for people to actually live. The issue of cold is also an issue. I think that finding one that is already wired, already has the heat source or air source windows. There are many products out there now. They're pretty amazing. And I would find one that is, it's not an architecture student project. You get something that is really well designed and it will hold up. And it can be used.
Do you find that there's a preference for durability, lifespan, between the ones that you see?
I think that we hear a lot of statistics around how long they'll last, and it depends on who's living in them. But I also think this shouldn't be seen as a permanent source. I mean, these are really temporary shelters, and they will break down depending on the weather. But they're a wide variety, and to really do that research and talk to other cities that have these, which all of our West Coast cities have tiny houses now, and find out what products they've gone through over the years.
Really, you need to talk to people like in Denver where it gets really cold. Yeah, like talking to people in Portland or LA is not gonna help. Because their weather is, you could be outside every day of the year.
Yes, and I was just in Denver, I work in Denver as well, and they've just put up a pallet. So I know, some of these are brands and, but there are also containers that are being used. Already or insulated, there's some really interesting designs out there. But do make sure that the mold and the insulation, the heat, is already there, and make sure that it's already put together so you're not adding it on, because you also don't want to create a fire hazard.
Right. Which raises a great point in terms of the commitment, and again, I'm using that relatively light to the governor's office. If anyone's listening to it from the governor's office, it was an approximate. So if we get into this, we determine, let's say that Redmond wants to move forward, and it just will not make good sense for us to be at 20,000. And we're just not going to be able to meet that commitment, if you will. Happy, we're your partner to go chat with the governor's office on your behalf and say, this is the number that we can do, and this is the appropriate number because of these reasons. So we should feel less strung or, hamstrung by the number of units, more around what's the right temporary shelter for those that we're trying to serve.
Right, to protect them and give them dignity. That was the most wonderful thing about the Veterans Village. Actually, they put half bathrooms in each one of those units. Might have cost a bit more, but it gave, the first man that moved in was a diabetic and could not believe it. He had been homeless, and he actually had his own private half bath. So, we want people to transition on, and we are lucky transition. So doing it right is, I think you can see the results. It seems to work better. What didn't JW say? We've had 35 people now transition from the village. And that's like a 2-year program. But it's making serious inroads.
I also encourage you to look at Vancouver, British Columbia, for some modular construction that they're doing on temporary housing, supportive housing. And instead of it being unit by unit, it is stacked, so it is 2-story, 3-story. The structures can be taken down and moved, but they can put up these structures in 6 months, so it's a shorter term build, but it's housing. It looks like housing, it acts like housing, but it is more density, because unit by unit, 30 by 30 isn't gonna solve the larger problem. You do need to try to go up and go out when you can.
Thank you.
And it's cheaper than buying a hotel.
As we all.
We know. We know.
Okay, so are we okay? Do we need a motion? Are we?
I'm not sure. Are we?
Yeah.
We're gonna vote on it, yeah.
I would move.
Yes,
Okay.
go ahead.
Okay, I would move that we approve, Charles funds for RFQ projects in the recommended amounts that COIC has provided.
I second that.
So is that good, Tammy, or do we need the verbatim recommendation?
Oh, no.
For Bobby's rules today.
Bobby's rule.
All right, first and a second.
Okay, is there any further discussion? So moving a second. All in favor? Opposed? All right, so next item.
So Chair, I mean, the next one ties into that request, but you also have another request which will be following, and that is the data dashboard. And so Molly, that's the tee up for just in a minute. So you have the option, if you would like to set aside a pool of funds that would be able to assist in augmenting some of the costs associated with the RFQ projects that are yet to be identified. I know this is relatively squishy, but again, we're trying to have something that we can work with the project sponsors. And again, those are the jurisdictions, so that's many of you seated here, we'd be working with your teams. So this is not based on a science, this is based on the amount of funding that you have, the burn rate of the current cost associated with supporting the office. Also with the potential need that these projects might have. So the recommendation is that the CHRO board carve out a specific amount of money to be not exceeded in use. We can come back with what those costs associated would be. It's just giving COIC some idea to work with your teams on what might be available to spend toward these projects to get them across the finish line. So the number of 150 is not the same, that does not include the data dashboard requests that will be coming after this. So just for clarity. It could be 150, it could be 75, it could be just anything that the project sponsors know they have something that they're working with.
There any follow-up discussion from the group?
So Tammy, just give me a couple of examples of what the switching money would be to fill the funding gap. So you have a project and their unit cost is going to be 20,000, and that does not include, the pads, we can't get the concrete pads.
Okay.
I would see that this may or may not, you might make a decision that you want this used for landscaping because that's important. That's also not an eligible cost out of the other fund.
Operations?
Sorry?
Operations?
Operations, so you have staffing costs for either the jurisdiction themselves or it's some admin for the nonprofit that you're working with. It is furnishings, it is anything, so it feels pretty clear that the pod funding is for the structure and the things. And
They're totally separate and probably not even applicable to this conversation, but it's stuck in my head, so I apologize.
Yeah.
Could we ever spend a portion of our funding to actually train a peer support individual who might be living in one of these pod areas?
Like, yes.
have that person brought up out of the ground to be there with the correct training, because that's not necessarily an operational cost, it's a training and support cost,
Yes.
and it might help our partners move forward, because they're gonna have to pay for that themselves too.
Absolutely. Your funding is unrestricted. It needs to be for this purpose. You couldn't, build a road, but, well, maybe you could if it's going into it. I'm just, yes, everything is, I love Greg. I love Greg. So, but also you, could actually be getting executive order funding too for some of that outreach. So
I was
there's
just
a
imagining different
Yes.
uses of this in my head, so I apologize, because I believe I bring it up on.
No, that's great. Yep.
But don't we have, you did mention furnishings, but British Hope has done like the whole Veterans Village. I mean, Megan just had I think it's extremely successful fundraising the other day. I would hope that they would be part of our,
Absolutely.
finished product. They do lovely work.
And that, what you're speaking to is the alignment of efforts, and that's where we really get that momentum of that snowball of, because if it's not out of this.
This one talks about walls.
Yeah, right, well, it's gonna be 90 soon, so we might want some.
Yeah, we will do.
Yeah,
We'll
we want
do snowballs.
we want snow cones. But every dollar we don't need out of some of these pots, because there are other assets or investment we can make. The first go for us to achieve that.
Yeah, and we see that with shelters, we see that with affordable housing, it takes
Yeah.
a million different sources of funding and resources to make them be viable. And so, I mean, I think this is important for us to be able to fill in some gaps that are needed for these projects. This is something that we really hung our hat on as a board, saying we want to do this RFQ and do a regional response. So I'm in favor.
Was that a motion?
Sure. I think that we set aside $150,000 to be used to support the tier 1 and tier 2 projects. And request that COIC work with each project sponsor to identify funding gaps in their projects and work with COIC to grade eligible executive order funding, shelter unit funding, and CHRO unrestricted funding to fill gaps. And to consider establishing a not to exceed amount for each project request. Or ask COIC to come, I see.
No,
I was reading this.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
You needed to stop, like.
I stopped, sorry, I'm a little tired. Yes, so, yeah, I'll stop after the gaps.
Second. Okay, is there any additional discussion for the group this moment? If so, I'm hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so.
Tammy,
Yes.
our unrestricted funds are intended to last until when?
Well, we could have spent them all 2 years ago,
Yeah.
honestly.
Right.
We have just been very, very, very frugal, careful, living on a shoestring so that we can actually get the funding to where we need to get it, which we're finally doing. But thank goodness we didn't spend it all the first 2 years, because trust me, it could have been done.
Well, and I think going back to the lessons learned that you've talked about, if we'd spent it all up front and then realized that was the wrong investment, we'd have no fallback. And I think
Yes.
we've done a lot of these other projects and said, yes, no, oops, what were we thinking? And it's all been good, because now we can support those gaps, support what we know is working.
And that's a
But our pilot,
yes.
is there a end point to our pilot?
So you are walking into the next item.
Okay.
And so thank you very much. And I will say that currently, so your costs associated with the Crow office right now, your burn rate is really zero. So we are providing our time as in kind, and same with the city of Bend. So again, this is an example of the leveraging of the resources that we have in the region to make sure that our unrestricted funds can go as far as possible. So let's take that one next, Chair, if that's okay. That should be instead of the data dashboard, since you have a number that teed us up.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so at the meeting on the 13th, you also spoke of establishing a subcommittee, a couple of them, to talk about the discussion around the next iteration of the House Bill 4123 pilots across the state. As you'll recall, Mike Savara, Errol Nelson, we're here to talk about sort of the landscape and the horizon. It appears that the seed that you all have planted has now blossomed, and so the state is also looking, our coordinated houseless response office is unique in that it supports one county within a region that has a service area much broader. And so the state is moving in a direction of recognizing regional approaches. And so there's an evolution on the horizon. And so a recommendation was made by Vice Chair Perkins to establish a couple of committees and possibly meet in the month of July and discuss what options and ideas what that could look like. The other would be the funding. There is a lot of activity right now happening around legislative funding. And so also a subcommittee on what that might look like. And we at CYC would be happy to help staff that and support. So I'm not sure if there's more there that you want to.
No, I think that this is sort of a good compromise that Chair Adair, you mentioned at the last meeting. We don't want to make it look like we're not doing any work this summer. So this way.
No, we cannot.
We'd be working, in July, doing these two committees. And then providing, some of the feedback for those who couldn't make these committees at our full board meeting in August.
So did you guys not hear the news? I think they said that 66 fires have started to date so far, and 65 of them were started by people. One was started by Mother Nature. So, yeah, this is great. 2 meetings, have the dates posted so that our group can all participate if they want to or if they don't, but it will be public noticed.
They'd be work sessions, and so there wouldn't be public comment, but they would be able to be streams of folks who can participate in that.
Yeah.
So do we have dates for this possibly?
Absolutely not.
There are meetings to have dates for, so.
Yeah.
There's that one little tiny sticky wicket.
Yeah.
Okay, so someone will be sending out a doodle poll then. It's not gonna cost us anything to answer, right?
No,
Right.
no, I'm free.
All right.
Okay.
Well, sort of.
So does this also require a Bobby's motion here?
Yeah, yes, it does.
I will move to establish 2 ad hoc committees, which would meet in July in place of a formal CRHO board meeting. I'm gonna stop. You want committee one?
You
Committee
stop
one,
before
committee
you-
one will discuss and identify next stops, as to what an evolution might look like for the Crow after January 1st of 2025. Committee 2 will discuss and identify potential funding requests to the 2025 legislative session to support ongoing homelessness work, including supporting investments made by the Crow.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so we have 2 seconds. Is there a third? Okay, any further comments on this? And a doodle poll will come to you all to see if you're available. So therefore, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, wonderful. So now we have to go back to the dashboard, is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
Before we start, Nikki handed me this, it's good, and I think this is really important. This is the actual bill that funded the CHRO, and it says if excess of funds available, eligible use to support the delivery of homeless services and shelters consistent with the 5-year strategic plan, including through contracts with service providers. So that is great.
Perfect. Makes me happy. Marty, thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
So yes.
Eliza, are you doing this one?
So I'll gin it up and then I'll turn it over to my friends. So at your June 13th meeting, there also was a proposal brought forward around data, and this is really timely in terms of the conversations that we just had earlier. So there was a discussion behind the scenes around sort of value engineering a bit the budget. And then also there are opportunities for us as a community likely to have some sustainable or-ish funding that would be able to be augmented through some other community partners. And so hence the recommendation, but I will turn it over to Molly for additional information.
Okay. The reason that we don't have a handout to review, I emailed it to you moments ago. Eliza and I met on this when we were getting our picture taken. So between the two of us, we're a little hard to kind of dial in. Wanted to not tear down the budget, but add our requests in a separate column. So that's what I've done. And the reason for that is because the regional data approach has to stay regional. It has to be fully integrated. We have to be aware of the cost at large. to be effective and to also continue to look toward what inputs we have, such as our HUD COC funding, what other inputs there might be available. The Homeless Leadership Coalition did take advantage of the Central Oregon Health Council grant. There may be some opportunity with Medicaid waiver money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So Eliza and I, our discussion around the ultimate creation of the dashboard, which is the goal of the PRO to have forward-facing, public-facing data that tells this story. And so we kept it constrained. The copy that you have that I'm looking at now has green highlighted.
Is that what you're asking for, the green highlighted?
The green highlighted, yes.
Okay, so you're asking for $46,372.
You can round down or up.
I mean,
yes.
We actually have to be exact with our funding.
Okay, that's
It's
fine.
public money and yes.
So let me tell you what that is. So that's a third, because everything that goes through the Homeless Leadership Coalition will always be regional. Regardless of what it's supporting or who's really invested in that end game. So a third of the coordinated entry specialist is $22,497, and that's based on a projected salary and fringe benefits. And then a retooling to make the CES phone more available and accessible. Be it a Teams phone line or a Google phone line, asking for 100% of that so we can get that up and going and have more regular, consistent, valuable input to create that data, into the system to create that data. Also investing in Tableau and ArcGIS for the first year. And those are the annual costs there so that we have that, so that we can dig in, have that reliably accessible to our team. And then, so we've got those costs, we estimated the team's Google phone at $9,500. Tableau, and these are annual costs at $3,500, ArcGIS at $3,125. And then because it's imperative for us, certainly would want to hire a bilingual person to fill that CES specialist role, but typically bilingual across Central Oregon means Spanish. So we would want to have a language access contract that's currently held or paid for under the Central Oregon Health Council grant for HLC, but we want to make sure that that continues. So anybody of any language has access to coordinated entry. The next piece is a stipend, and like, I would love to spend this whole 300 or I'm adding like. Stipends. I would love to see Linda Long engaged in this process, and so having stipends and honorariums for people to be engaged in this system.
I feel like it's so important to show the true picture.
Yeah. And then a significant investment in training so that we have multiple staff. I don't want to train one person because turnover happens. I want to have some legacy there. And $3,500 in training across those two software platforms. So for that total of $46,372.
Question is 372, is that what you said?
That's what I said.
Who is taking our notes today? Angela.
No, you can watch the recording.
Well,
We'll watch the recording and someone will take it.
Right, so somebody's going to, okay.
So yeah, it's $46,372.
Question is Deschutes County really only a third of
No,
the position?
absolutely not.
I mean, let's be real.
If you want me to put in 85% there to really reflect the.
I mean, I guess I would ask you, what is the true breakdown of, with the three counties in Warm Springs? What would be the true breakdown that Deschutes County's percentage that this would encompass?
I am happy to gather that and send version number 47 or 3, whichever you want to count. If that's, I think that there will be opportunity, just in what I see across the state. There will be opportunity with the next legislative session to enhance data systems. And so I didn't want to be overzealous in asking and requesting. We just need a presence and integral support right now to get the dashboard going. That was the primary ask. And if you think about the coordinated entry specialist, they are going to, a third of their time dedicated to getting this pulled together and up and running. I think that's reasonable.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I mean, I framed it within the county, but I think that third of their FTE being dedicated to getting the dashboard integrated, both created, integrated, and that's gonna be alongside the in-house services data coordinator, because that's where some of our existing experience is. But having that person be at the table with the data, really able to understand how that translates into the engagements that they will have in front of them. So I think a third of it is really still realistic.
For our federal friends who may not, the CHRO is Deschutes County, but our COC, our team of care, is Deschutes County, Jefferson Brook, and Warm Springs Reservation, so that's why we're having this conversation.
So would it make sense to maybe refine the recommendation and have it be 85% of the project costs? To truly reflect what the Deschutes portion of the data dashboard.
If it slows things down at all, I'd say they made a recommendation, let's take it.
Okay.
And run with it. And if we determine that it
There's
needs
more
to be
needed.
more than that,
Yeah.
then come back. Let's
I'm gonna.
get it on the
agree.
road.
Yeah, I can always come back.
We need to get going.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, get it
and
started.
empower staff, and there is that CES specialist role is one that would need to be hired.
Okay.
So we have a job description already, because they were anticipating creating that position, so I think that just going, is great.
So the project cost originally was around 200,000.
For the
And
entirety
years.
of the data system,
Okay, so-
it's 245.
And so now we're talking 46. I'm just making sure that if this body is investing a certain amount, that we won't be held up trying to get the remainder of the funding is my question.
No, the rest of the
Okay.
funding
Okay.
right now has been secured. We're in the final year of the Central Oregon Health Council grant. So we will probably have this next discussion, but I think it's a valid discussion to have after we see what kind of investment the state needs into. So that we don't say, oh, we asked for half of this, or we asked for 85% of this, but we really have all this, and it can only be used here, while you've got your flexible funds that can be used in A through Z ways, and I don't wanna over request and then have to say.
So what kind of life is this $46,000 have? And is it gonna be good for our calendar year? Is it gonna be good for 3 months?
This is an annual budget.
Okay,
Yeah.
an annual budget, so you're saying for the next 12 months, if we pay the 40, if we allocate the 46, we will be good then? Okay, just wanted to be clear.
I would like to move, with a couple of stipulations, I would move that the CHRO fund, 46,372, sorry, I have to pull it up. To, the data project, with stipulations that we have a future conversation, about, first of all, how things are going, and then also, access to sustainable funds for the future. Yes.
Good, and that was part of the recommendation, it's coming back before the board December 1st of this year, so that should just be included in that conversation of outlining partners.
Yeah.
And potential options to keep it going.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So your annual year, is that June 1st, July 1st? What is the annual year?
July 1st.
July 1st, okay. So we're actually doing something ahead of time.
And Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you,
So
Molly.
that'll be the sheets actually distributing the funding. So,
Yeah.
just since, okay, very good.
Okay, and someone will write that in the minutes. Yeah, they will. All right, so let's see, do we have anything else that we need to discuss at this moment?
I do want to say thank you, Mickey, for spearheading the data dashboard conversation. And you're, she is non-responsive, so you kept going, and I appreciate you, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mickey, for all the.
Yes, for everything.
Yeah. It's always, yes.
Oh,
Always
wow.
thinking you're thinking. Teamwork makes the dream work. That. I think you actually finished early with
Oh my
a
gosh,
really
it's so
packed
exciting.
day. That was Yeah, extraordinary.
Yeah, I want to thank all of you that worked so hard, absolutely, to get this together. Took a general notion of what would be a great thing to happen and made it happen. And I know there was a lot of dashing around at the last minute, and all of you represented Central Oregon and our pro board well, and thank you.
I do have a question. What is happening in our community? I know somebody made some comments about hotels being used. What about Old Mill Suites?
Oh, they're doing quite well, so they.
Do they have people there?
And not yet, no, so we've made the safety decision to not place people until the entire project is completed because of liability. And so, it is an active construction site, and then what they've discovered, what we went into is that we'd be able to phase it in terms of, sort of areas. Unfortunately, the way the infrastructure, which is very outdated under the buildings themselves, that has not been possible. So, and some structural challenges with, being on site over there, you definitely sort of just naturally want to duck a little. Anyway, they're making great headway, staying within budget, and yet it's just the decision to wait until September 1st. If sooner, that would be great, but likely those units will be, well, they for sure will be online by September 1st.
Are we talking 76 or 75?
It'll be 74, maybe 75.
Okay.
So, meaning that one of them might be for a staff person.
A pure person that lives there and that helps the people progress.
What's people identified for, is it through coordinated entry?
It'll be coordinated entry.
Through coordinated entry,
Yeah.
yes, and so, taking a hotel and turning it into, long-term living arrangements, they would have been market rate apartments, and so
They're nice,
instead.
they're gonna be.
Oh my gosh, they're so beautiful,
The
so
studios.
they'll be, like.
How many square feet is each one?
Oh, boy, so
Small.
it varies, some are small, but there would be also family units too.
Yeah, they have
Yeah.
some larger ones in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
My family used to live in that property. when it was
Oh
a
my
hotel.
gosh.
So how many family units, guys?
I don't know off the top of my head that I can.
Okay, just wondering, because we have families, we have a lot of
Yes,
families
we
that
do
need
have
help.
Yeah, right.
And I would just hope that
Yeah.
there would be more family units as possible for the
Yeah.
community.
Yeah, it's definitely a.
I mean, we heard
We're in.
there's
Yes,
seven,
it is.
there's 7 kids out in China.
Yeah.
Oh my
Sometimes
gosh,
more.
we've got to get them out of there.
Yeah.
And this is,
That was a question I had about unsheltered homelessness and prioritization. Is there any way to prioritize people since we've been having that conversation?
Safe Parking in Redmond does that. Rick Russell runs that program, and he has definitely prioritized families, when we met months ago.
We were saying unsheltered.
Yeah, so our COC prioritizes unsheltered individuals for placements. They also prioritize folks who are more medically vulnerable.
Yeah.
There's a variety of prioritization, and then as Patty said, some of the properties have their own prioritization. But the COC is prioritizing people who are unhoused. Same thing with like the funding that comes through the governor's office, the EO funding, requiring prioritization for folks who are living in housing.
Okay, it's now 1 o'clock somewhere, and I've got to be in Sisters in 30 minutes. So, thank you
Better
all.
book it.
And we will talk to you later about the HUD project funding. So thank you. Thank you all.
And please take some food, Patty.
Yes.
I never smell it.